Hey friends, tonight, let's explore the art of not freezing to death in a world without electric blankets, hot cocoa, or even the comforting glow of a thermostat. Imagine it's the 14th century. You're curled up in what can barely be called a house. It's more like a rectangular box made of damp wood and questionable hope. Outside, the wind is howling like an unpaid minstrel. And inside, well, the only thing louder is your teeth. Before you settle in, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy the content here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your medieval survival bunker. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So back to you. It's cold. Not grab a sweater cold. This is your eyebrows are stiff cold. You shuffle across the packed dirt floor in wool socks that have holes in the toes and hope in the heel. You grab a blanket, but it's less of a blanket and more of a burlap bag that once held onions. It smells like it still does. And then you remember the trick, the secret passed down from your grandmother's grandmother who survived the blizzard of '82, the 1282 Wawan. Obviously, you reach for the ashes. Yes, ashes. Not in a poetic sense. Literal ashes. From the fire you were tending earlier that day, you're going to sleep in them. Warm ashes hold heat long into the night, and they don't judge your life choices. They also don't move much, which is more than can be said for the rats. You brush back the coldest layer, revealing a silvery bed of glowing embers beneath. They look like fireflies took up pottery with a piece of flat wood or a shovel or your cousin's broken lute. You smooth out a mound and lie directly on it carefully because your socks are wool and your dignity is flammable. You throw a few layers of straw or old cloaks over yourself, and voila, you're a toasted marshmallow in the age of plague. There's a smell, of course, a toasty, singed smell that lingers in your clothes and your hair and your dreams. But it's better than frostbite. Maybe. And let's be honest, this is not the weirdest part of the night. The house, by the way, doesn't hold in heat. The walls are wattle and daub, which is fancy medieval speak for sticks and mud. The wind passes through like it pays rent. And the door, it's just a piece of timber, leaned at an angle, held shut by a rock, and the sheer force of your wishes. But the ashes are warm. They hold on to heat like a grumpy grandparent, reluctantly but with determination. Some families even dig shallow pits in the floor to collect embers and surround them with stones, creating medieval heating pads. You know, for your back, or your cat, or your soul. Speaking of cats, if you're lucky enough to have one, it's probably sitting on your chest right now. Not out of affection, but because you're the warmest object in the room. It purrs with the smugness of an animal who doesn't pay taxes and never had to chop wood. There are risks, of course. Roll over the wrong way, and you wake up with a hole in your tunic and a smoky sense of regret. Some villagers keep a thin plank of wood between them and the ash like a primitive fire mattress. Others just accept that a few singed hairs are the price of survival. Now, here's your medieval fun fact. Some historians believe this ash sleeping technique was so effective that certain communities kept one corner of their homes specifically for hot ashes called a glow pit. It's like a heated mattress. If your mattress were made of dirt ash and existential questions. And for the quirk of the night, some folks didn't just sleep in ash. They believed it purified bad spirits. So if you had a bad dream or a streak of bad luck, you were told to go lie in the ashes, which frankly might be the most passive-aggressive curse ever. There's even an academic debate, yes truly, on whether sleeping in ashes originated as a survival method or a spiritual ritual. Did they do it to stay warm or to cleanse their aura? Of medieval Monday energy scholars argue, and frankly, neither side has clean socks. As you drift off tonight, imagine lying flat on warm dirt, blanketed in soot, listening to the creak of timber above and the occasional snore of the pig in the corner. It's not glamorous, but it works, and you'd better believe you'll dream about modern mattresses, maybe even ones with memory foam, or at least something that doesn't come with embedded cinders and the faint scent of despair. But hey, you're warm. And in the Middle Ages, that's practically luxury. Fun thought to end on. If you ever time travel to the 14th century, just bring a space heater. Or better yet, a flamethrower. For warmth, of course. You wake up with soot in your eyebrows and the vague memory of a dream involving roast potatoes and a fire that talked. Morning in the medieval countryside arrives without mercy. The ash pit has cooled. Your cat has moved on, probably to sleep on the slightly warmer pig, and your tongue feels like it's made of wool. You're thirsty, deeply, painfully thirsty. You sit up, stretch, and immediately regret it as your spine makes a noise like old bread breaking. Still, survival beckons. And in the Middle Ages, thirst isn't just unpleasant, it's a legitimate threat to your existence. The stream by your hut is frozen. Again, you eye the small wooden barrel by the door, hoping it still holds some liquid. It doesn't. It's full of something sure, but that something is mostly sediment, a few unidentifiable twigs, and what might be a drowned spider with a flair for drama. So now you have two choices. One, chew snow and pretend it's a milkshake. Two, go dig for water like some kind of thirsty archaeologist. Before you settle into the horror of early hydration techniques, a quick reminder, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy the content here. And comment your location and time zone. It's nice to know who else is awake and parched with me. Now about that water. The local well is more of a pit, a communal hole lined with stones and optimism. It's shallow, muddy, and frequently home to frogs. When it rains, the water level rises yay. When it doesn't, people just sort of stare into it and sigh. Boiling is the key, of course. Everyone says that. You must boil the water. But there's a catch. You don't have a metal pot. You don't even have a ceramic one right now. It broke last week when someone sat on it while hiding from a goat. Long story. So how do you boil water without a pot? Rocks. Hot rocks. This is the part where you really start questioning your life choices. You gather a few smooth stones, rinse off the suspicious slime, and place them carefully in the fire until they glow a gentle, angry red. Then, using a pair of wooden tongs you made last winter out of desperation and dry branches, you plop the stones into a wooden bowl of water. It hisses. It steams. It smells vaguely of despair, but it works, sort of. After a few rounds, you're left with warmish water with a smoky overtone and maybe less bacteria. Maybe. Here's your historical tidbit of the night. In certain rural villages, people used gutter collectors, hollowed logs that collected runoff from roofs to gather drinking water. They believed the thatch filtered it. It didn't. But hey, at least the water had flavor. Usually moss. Now, the odd little fact you didn't ask for in some regions: iron nails were dropped into barrels of water overnight in the hope that it would make the water strong. That's right. They were essentially microdosing rust. The theory: A little iron in the system was good for vitality. The reality tetanus, probably, or just a deeply unpleasant aftertaste. But you drink it anyway. And that brings us to an ongoing scholarly debate. Was medieval water really as dangerous as we think? Or are we just modern germaphobes looking down our noses at the past with our filtered carafes and lemon wedges? Some historians argue that people did drink water, just carefully, usually fresh spring water, fast-moving streams, or melted snow. Others claim beer and ale were consumed constantly because the brewing process killed off the nasties. So was it hydration or inebriation? A bit of both, perhaps. Would you rather be thirsty or tipsy? That's a medieval question, if there ever was one. Back to you. You finally get your water, down lukewarm smoky, with notes of oak and mild panic, and feel marginally more alive. You think longingly of orange juice, or even just a cold glass of tap water with ice cubes. What a concept. Ice cubes. You laugh. The sound scares a bird outside. Later that day, you help haul a new barrel to the house. It's been patched with resin and bound with rope. It leaks slightly. You love it anyway. You try to teach your younger cousin to catch rain in their mouth. They stare up at the sky too long and sneeze directly into the only clean bowl. You consider disowning them, and just before sunset, you and a few neighbors argue gently over whether storing water in clay jars or animal bladders keeps it cooler. It's a pleasant debate full of passive-aggressive compliments and gestures with spoons. At bedtime, you sip your final ladle of rainwater, now delicately flavored with wood smoke and one mint leaf you found earlier and definitely did not wash. It tastes like survival. Fun thought to end on. If bottled water ever existed, back then it probably would have said, filtered through 3 generations of frogs and optimism. You go to bed, hoping foolishly that tonight you won't fall off the wooden plank again. Your back still remembers last night's dramatic roll and drop into the ash pit, a tumble that left your dignity bruised and your nose full of soot. But tonight, you've got a plan. You tighten the cord around your waist, not for fashion, not to make a medieval statement. No, this rope, this glorious, itchy rope, is what's going to keep you on the bed, which, let's be honest, is just 2 uneven planks of wood balanced on stacked rocks and regret. This isn't a mattress. It's more like a dare. See, in the Middle Ages, people didn't always have proper beds, not even close. Many slept on straw-stuffed sacks or bundles of reeds laid directly on cold floors. And to avoid slipping off their rudimentary setups, especially on uneven sloped floors, they literally tied themselves in place, belly down, rope over the torso, knotted to a beam, or a bedpost if they were fancy, or to a nearby goat if they were realistic. And you've chosen the classic waist tie. It's like medieval seatbelt safety, except there are no crash dummies, just sleepwalking and gravity. Before we continue, take a second to like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. And drop your time and location below, especially if you've ever tried sleeping with livestock nearby. Solidarity is important. Now back to the bed, or the medieval approximation of one. You shift onto your side, feeling the rope dig gently into your ribs. It's tight enough to hold loose enough to breathe. Or so you hope. Around you, the house is mostly quiet. Someone outside is snoring. It might be a neighbor, might be a pig. Either way, they sound content. And you're tethered like a determined little burrito hoping the rats don't tickle your toes in the night. Your bedding consists of a scratchy woolen cloak that doubles as your daytime coat. Under you is a straw mat full of splinter seeds and a surprising number of spiders. You pretend not to notice. Survival is sometimes about denial. Here's your historical tidbit for tonight. Wealthier folks did have beds with rope supports, literally a wooden frame with ropes strung across it like a hammock. Over time, these ropes would sag, so every few days they were tightened. That's where the phrase sleep tight comes from. And while we're here, don't let the bed bugs bite. That's not a metaphor. Bed bugs were prolific and resilient, basically medieval roommates. But you're not rich. You're just clever. You invented the human harness system. You will not roll. You cannot roll. Your body is a stable, motionless bundle of mild resentment and cold toes. Let's detour briefly into a delightfully weird fact. Some households shared beds, not just couples or children, but full-grown adults, sometimes strangers. There were even guest slots in beds, sort of like booking a seat in a sleeping sandwich. You'd wake up with someone's elbow in your ear and a vague hope that no one had fleas. It was survival. It was social. It was surprisingly warm. But back to your solo situation. You turn onto your back, the rope shifting slightly. You hear a thud outside, probably the cow again. The thatched roof groans in the wind, sending bits of straw onto your face like a sleepy blessing. You blink and sigh. Then remember the pillow. It's not a pillow. It's a bundle of linen wrapped around a potato sack. You fluff it anyway. It doesn't help. You've long accepted that comfort is a myth and posture is a rumor. And here's your scholarly debate of the evening. Did people really sleep in the same way we do today? 8 uninterrupted hours, peaceful dreams, warm blankets, and all. Turns out, probably not. Many historians now believe people slept in 2 shifts, first sleep and second sleep, with a wakeful period in between. During that break, they prayed, stoked the fire, checked on animals, or my personal favorite, just sat in the dark, thinking about things. You know, like how cold their feet were, or how loud that one chicken breathes. Some even wrote poetry, because nothing says I'm surviving the 14th century like composing a sonnet in your sleep robe at 2 a.m. about the moon and existential dampness. As you drift off into your first sleep, you're reminded of just how important rope really is. It ties boats, binds roofs, secures food, and now keeps you safely on a wooden plank while the wind screams outside. Who needs memory foam when you've got medieval innovation? And just before your eyes close, you whisper a soft goodnight to the rope, not because you're weird, but because tomorrow is uncertain. And this rope is objectively the most reliable thing in your life right now. Fun thought to end on. If IKEA ever sold medieval beds, the instructions would be a single image of a rope and the words, "Good luck." The morning greets you with fog on your breath and something cold and crunchy underfoot that may or may not have once been bread. You're hungry, not in a poetic, I could eat a little something way, but in a gnawing, hollow kind of hunger that makes you seriously consider whether candle wax counts as food. But you don't panic, because today is root cellar day. You lift the loose floorboard by the hearth carefully. Since the last time you did this, you disturbed a family of very territorial spiders and peer into the darkness. A small wooden ladder leads down into a space no taller than a crouch, and you descend like a medieval raccoon on a mission. Welcome to your survival stash, the Ham Chua Bee Mat, your personal underground pantry, a miracle of mud temperature regulation and hope. Before we get any deeper into this literal hole, go ahead and dim the lights a bit more. And if you find these late night histories soothing, go ahead. Take a second to like and subscribe. It helps this little storytelling fire burn brighter. And tell me in the comments if you've ever tried storing carrots under your bed for warmth, asking for a 14th century friend. So back to the cellar. It smells like soil-old potatoes and something vaguely medicinal. The temperature is cooler than above ground, but warmer than the air outside, perfect for storing things you don't want to die, like turnips. Or your dreams. Stacked along the earthen wall are baskets of root vegetables, parsnips, carrots, beets the size of a newborn goat. You've also got some herbs, tied in bundles, a few onions dangling from twine, and one suspiciously green apple that might be older than you. There's no refrigeration, no preservatives, no plastic wrap, just dirt and gravity and a deep understanding of what rots fast and what doesn't. Here's your historical tidbit. Of the night medieval root cellars weren't just holes in the ground. They were calculated, clever, and deeply local. People understood airflow, insulation, moisture control. Some cellars had tiny ventilation shafts. Others were built into north-facing hillsides for year-round coolness. You know, like nature's refrigerator, but with way more spiders. Tonight's odd fact. Some folks believed that storing a cross made of elder branches in the cellar would bless the food. Not for flavor, just to keep spirits out. Because the one thing worse than spoiled cabbage is haunted cabbage. Now, let's talk preservation techniques. You're not just throwing veggies in a pile and hoping for the best. You're layering cabbage heads, wrapped in linen and buried in sawdust. Apples nested in straw to avoid bruising. Carrots stuck upright in barrels of sand, looking like they're in time out. And in the corner, your pride and joy, a single clay pot of sauerkraut, fermenting with the vigor of 10 angry witches. The smell is memorable. You reach for a turnip and inspect it like it's a rare gem. It's lumpy, dirt-covered, and slightly squishy, but edible. You bite in. It tastes like revenge and fiber, but it'll keep you alive, and that's the point. You also notice a curious little basket tucked away behind a rock. It contains dried mushrooms, delicate brown and almost paper-like. You don't remember putting them there. That's fine. Probably. You've also got a small sack of salt, carefully kept away from the damp, and a lump of lard wrapped in cloth that you're saving for a special occasion. You're not sure what occasion that might be. Perhaps day we don't die of hunger. That seems festive enough. And then you spotted the forgotten jar of pickled something. Possibly onions. Possibly eggs. Possibly experimental. You give it a cautious shake. It burps slightly. You decide to let it continue its journey uninterrupted. Here's tonight's academic whisper of doubt. Some historians argue that the role of root cellars is overstated. That many peasants simply didn't have the means or stability to maintain one. But others push back, pointing to archaeological evidence of storage pits and even written accounts of preservation rituals. So did everyone have a secret underground vegetable lair? Maybe not. But the clever ones did. And you're clever and alive. You fill a basket with the essentials: onions, turnips, a handful of half-hopeful apples, and climb back up, brushing dirt off your knees and shaking cobwebs from your hair. You don't mind the grime. That's the scent of victory. Later by the fire, you nibble on roasted root vegetables with salt and lard, and you swear it's a feast. You dream about the future, about warm kitchens, refrigerators, avocados that last longer than 2 days. But you also dream about the cellar, quiet, cool, safe. It feels like the closest thing to control you have in a chaotic, muddy world. Fun thought to end on. If supermarkets disappeared tomorrow, would you know how to bury a beet properly? No, that's okay. You're still ahead of 14th century Gerald, who once tried to preserve a melon by stuffing it in his boot. It didn't work. You smell earthy, not in a fresh morning dew on a mountain sense, more like old turnip wet dog and a slight tang of regret. You have survived another night in the cold, another morning of chewing lukewarm roots, and now it's time for your quarterly bath. Yes, bath, singular. This is not a daily ritual. This is not self-care. This is an act of medieval crisis management. You drag the wooden tub into the corner. It's cracked, patched with tar, and suspiciously sticky in places, but it holds water sometimes. You've already heated a few buckets over the fire, carefully carried from your rain barrel, and now comes the cleansing. Sort of. But before we scrub away the dirt of 3 festivals and a goat wrestling incident, take a moment to like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. And don't forget to comment your time zone and whether your ancestors probably smelled like wet hay and onions too. Now, for soap. You reach under the bed, or rather, under the pile of things, pretending to be a bed, and pull out the soap block. It's rough, crumbly, and smells like someone cooked bacon in a volcano. Because, well, they kind of did. This is your medieval miracle soap, made from wood ash and animal fat. Specifically, you collected ashes from last month's cooking fires, the gray powdery leftovers from burning oak pine, and that one chair you swore was cursed. You mix those ashes with rainwater to create a basic lye, an alkaline solution that can melt your soul and your fingerprints if you're not careful. Then you rendered animal fat, usually pig, sometimes sheep, occasionally whatever was left after market day. You boiled it, slowly stirring with a stick you now call the wand of cleanliness, and mixed it with the lye until it thickened into something vaguely soap-adjacent. You poured the goop into a wooden mold, let it harden for a few weeks, and voila, cleansing cube of mild danger. The result? A soap that works. Kind of. It strips away grease dirt and several layers of skin. It leaves you feeling raw, but righteous. Tonight's historical tidbit lye soap was a staple across medieval Europe. Families made it seasonally, usually after slaughter time when fat was plentiful and noses were already offended. It was used for everything: bodies' laundry dishes, sometimes even to discipline overly talkative children. Not recommended. And now, for the weird fact you didn't ask for, in some towns, people believed that soap could trap evil spirits, particularly if the fat came from a black pig and the ash from a tree struck by lightning. That's right. Your soap was also your shield. Take that, demons. You lower yourself into the tub, slowly, carefully. Because the water is only sort of warm, the bottom is suspiciously slimy. And last time you slipped, you hit your head on a turnip. The bruise still hums with memory. You scrub. The soap squeaks against your skin. It doesn't lather like modern soap. There are no bubbles. just friction, sandpaper in bar form, but you can feel the dirt surrendering, protesting as it goes. There's a smell, smoky, meaty, ancient. You imagine your ancestors nodding approvingly from the great hall of stink. And just as you begin to feel a little cleaner, your cousin bursts in. They announce that the neighbor is boiling laundry water and accidentally turned their blouse into glue again. You nod solemnly. Soap is powerful. Here's your academic whisper for the night. Some scholars debate how often medieval people bathed. Popular belief says almost never, but records show bathhouses in cities, herbal cleansing rituals in monasteries, even scented water for the nobility. So were people dirty by choice, or just occasionally unlucky with plumbing? Back to you. You dump a final cup of warm water over your head brace against the shock and breathe. You smell better. Not great, but not offensive. A solid win. You dry off with a linen cloth that's more whole than fabric and wring out your hair by the fire. You feel reborn, or at least rebooted. You hide the soap back under the bed like a sacred relic and smile faintly. It's done. The bath, the ritual, the pain. Later, wrapped in your cloak, you sip something warm and scratch idly at your now over-cleansed skin. You remind yourself not to bathe again until spring, or unless you fall in a well, whichever comes first. Fun thought to end on: if luxury brands existed back then, your soap would be sold in a velvet pouch labeled Ode to Bacon Fire. You wake up scratching. It's not glamorous. It's not subtle. It's that full-body, determined, double-handed scratch you do when the world beneath your clothes has come alive. Welcome to the medieval morning. You've got rep. Again, but don't panic. Because in the 14th century, this isn't a crisis, it's just Tuesday. You sit up and adjust your underlayer, which is made of, wait for it, raw, untreated sheep's wool. It's itchy. It's warm. It smells like someone tried to make a sweater out of damp livestock and hay fever. But it keeps the cold out, and that's worth all the discomfort and maybe a little rash. Before we get into the magical, miserable world of medieval undergarments and superstition insect alliances, go ahead and hit like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. And tell me in the comments if you've ever worn anything so itchy it made you reevaluate your relationship with comfort. Now let's talk about sheep. Your base layer isn't some delicate linen chemise. It's not even woven. It's just wool. Direct wool. Scraped, carded, loosely stitched together with bone needles and prayer. It clings to your body like a damp apology, but it holds heat like nothing else. The natural oils lanolin create a kind of water resistance, so when snow melts on your shoulder, it just rolls off, directly down your back. Surprise, your spine now knows what rain feels like inside clothes. But the real joy of this outfit isn't the warmth. It's what lives inside it. Rep, lice, fleas, tiny invaders that see your woolen onesie as a 5-star inn and breakfast. And believe it or not, people didn't always mind. In fact, some believed that certain lice were protective charms, spiritual bouncers keeping bad luck away by distracting it with itching. Tonight's historical tidbit: it was widely believed that certain parasites sucked out illness. If you were sick and you had lice, the lice were doing work. You were blessed. No, really. There are actual texts where monks debated whether removing lice was sinful because you were interfering with God's tiny surgeons. Here's your fun medieval oddity. In some rural communities, A person would deliberately catch a louse, whisper a wish to it, and then release it into someone else's clothes like a low-tech carrier pigeon. May it crawl to the one who cursed me, they'd say dramatically before flicking the poor thing into a neighbor's sock pile. Witchcraft? Maybe. Passive aggression? Definitely. So there you are, wrapped in itchy wool, feeling noble in your suffering. You try not to scratch during meals, because that's considered rude, but everyone else is doing it too. It's practically a communal activity. Lice-checking circles were common. If someone likes you, they might pick a flea off your shoulder. That's love. You layer your tunic over your wool base. The tunic is made of homespun, flax-dyed, vaguely brown, with something you think was bark, but might have been pond scum. It smells faintly of boiled stew and ambition. You belt it tight with a rope that used to secure the goat pen. Multi-purpose. And here's your scholarly debate of the evening. Were medieval people truly as infested as we imagine? Or is this all exaggerated by later storytellers trying to make themselves feel better about modern hygiene? Some researchers argue that medieval folks did try to stay clean. There were bathhouses, herbs for scent, even rudimentary combs made from horn or wood. But others point to archaeological digs filled with combs so full of louse remains they could have hosted insect town hall meetings. So, maybe both. Back to you. You step outside into the brittle morning air. The wool itches, the lice march, but you're warm, mostly, and you've got your amulet. Yes, your literal bedbug pouch. A small cloth charm tied to your belt, filled with herbs, salt, and dried insects. The smell keeps spirits away. And conveniently, most people. Your neighbor greets you with a nod and a visible scratch. You nod back and scratch in reply. It's a language, a culture, a mutual understanding of suffering wrapped in wool. Later, while foraging for greens, you find a mossy rock and sit for a moment. The sun cuts through the trees. You feel the tiny tickle of a flea hopping down your sock, and for once, you don't swat it. Maybe it's carrying a message. Maybe it's wishing you luck. Or maybe it's just hungry. Either way, you survive another day. Fun thought to end on. If medieval influencers had existed, there'd probably be a TikTok trend called Chi-Wool-Core, where people rate their itchiest outfits and count how many lice they catch before breakfast. You wake up, breathe in, and instantly regret it. Your own breath smells like something that once tried to be soup, but gave up halfway through and became a curse. It's thick, warm, and unmistakably garlicky. You are in essence a walking loaf of medieval protection. Why? Because in your world, garlic isn't just for flavor. It's for survival. Not against hunger, no, that would be too obvious, but against evil and colds. And your cousin, who keeps trying to borrow your only spoon. So before you even open your eyes fully, you reach under your straw pillow, unwrap a waxy cloth, and pop a cold clove of garlic into your mouth, like it's a breath mint made in a haunted garden. Chew. Regret. Swallow. But hey, you're safe now. At least that's what everyone says. Before we unpack the deliciously strange legacy of the garlic defense strategy, take a second to like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. And let me know in the comments, what's your personal food-based self-defense method? Back to the garlic. You chew slowly because you have to. The clove is fibrous, sharp, and somewhere between spicy and the inside of a knight's boot. But it works, at least in theory. In medieval Europe, garlic was life armor. It was believed to ward off everything bad spirits, colds, fevers, curses, nosy neighbors, and romance. One bite, and you were spiritually sealed. Your grandmother used to say, "A clove in the morning keeps the demon from forming." She also talked to trees, but that doesn't mean she was wrong. Here's your historical tidbit. For tonight, garlic was one of the most universally used herbal remedies in medieval medicine. It was crushed into salves, boiled into broths, hung in doorways, and yes, eaten raw by anyone hoping to avoid plague possession or pesky pilgrims. Monasteries grew it in neat little rows, like rows of tiny angry knights. But here's the fun part. They didn't just believe garlic protected your body. They thought it protected your boundaries. You step outside after breakfast if you can call raw garlic and half a boiled beet breakfast, and everyone gives you a little space. Not much, just enough. Like your very essence is pushing people back ever so gently. One sniff, and they think, maybe I'll just wave from here. And that's the point. In a world where privacy didn't exist, where people slept 5 to a bed, where neighbors borrowed onions without asking, and where personal space was more theory than practice, garlic was your social shield. Tonight's delightfully strange fact. In some towns, brides would wear garlic under their veils to keep impure spirits from entering their heads during vows. Imagine trying to kiss someone through a veil that smells like angry soup. Romantic. And for the real twist, there was a brief moment in certain regions where eating garlic was seen as rebellious. Why? Because the upper class viewed it as peasant food, too earthy, too pungent, too honest. So eating garlic became a kind of rustic pride, a statement, a big smelly middle finger to courtly perfumes and pear juice rinses. And here's your scholarly debate for the night. Did garlic actually help with disease prevention? Or was it just a very loud placebo? Some argue the antimicrobial properties were legitimate, especially in raw cloves. Others say its real power was behavioral people who ate garlic, kept to themselves, weren't kissed, and thus stayed healthier by accident. Either way, garlic wins. Back to you. By midday, you've reapplied your garlic layer. One raw one roasted for morale, and one braided into your belt for dramatic flair. A traveler tries to greet you at the market. You smile. They back away. Success. A child runs up, stops, sniffs, and runs back to their mother yelling, "The garlic witch is here again." You give them a wink. Maybe you are. Maybe you're just someone who knows a clove a day keeps the entire village away. As the sun sets, you tuck a few cloves under your pillow. Not just for dreams, garlic wards off night spirits too, according to every folklore grandmother ever. Also mice. Apparently, even rodents have standards. Fun thought to end on. If garlic had a theme song, it would be low proud and just a little spicy. Probably played on a lute by someone sitting slightly further away than usual. You wake up to a strange sound. Not the usual rooster scream or your cousin's sleep mumbling about goats. No, this is different. A low, slow creak that makes your spine tighten like you owe it money. You freeze under your blanket of straw and self-doubt listening. There it is again. Your walls are speaking. Literally. The wattle and daub structure of your home is shifting, not groaning in collapse yet, but murmuring in warning. Something's coming. Maybe rain. Maybe wind. Maybe the kind of storm that ruins haystacks and relationships. And that means it's time for your most powerful tool, your pointer finger. Before we dive into the ancient art of storm detection, using your own slightly crusty hands, go ahead and hit like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. And drop a comment with your current weather. Let's see how well our ancestors would have guessed it. Now back to the wall. You shuffle barefoot across the dirt floor and press your palm flat against the outer edge of the house. The wall feels damp, not wet, not dry. The kind of moist that suggests the air itself is thinking about raining, but hasn't made up its mind yet. You hold your finger in the air, vertical, proud, hopeful. Wind, faint from the west. You nod solemnly, like the village weather oracle you pretend to be when no one's looking. You then check the cracks in the daub. This part is important. The finer the cracking, the drier the air has been. If the daub starts flaking into your mouth while you breathe, congrats, you're in for a humid nightmare and maybe a mild case of coughing fits. This is how medieval people predicted storms with Wall's skin instinct and a little drama. Here's your historical tidbit. Before barometers or fancy cloud apps, peasants used every cue available. The smell of the earth, the way birds flew, whether cows were lying down or plotting something, and most importantly, how the wind felt on the back of the hand. Your hand becomes your sensor. You hold it out of a window crack, eyes half closed, as if you're receiving the secrets of the universe, which you kind of are. If your fingers start to tingle, it might mean lightning, or maybe you're just cold. Either way, take it seriously. Tonight's quirky fact. Some medieval communities believed that if the inside of your house walls began to sweat at dawn, it meant a spiritual imbalance in the air. They would whisper apologies to the wind and sprinkle salt in the corners of the room. Not for seasoning. For balance, you take a pinch of dried lavender and rub it across one of the cracks. Not for the smell, though it helps, but because you read somewhere from your great aunt, mostly, that certain herbs calm the beams. Because yes, your house is a living thing, and it's moody. A low thump from the roof tells you the wind has changed. You go outside cloaked in wool and bravado and scan the horizon. The clouds are soft-edged and gray, the kind that say, "We're not dangerous, just disappointed." You kneel and check the mud. If your footprint disappears quickly, the ground is still thirsty. If it pools around your toes like soup, the rain is already watching you. You whisper, "Not today," to no one in particular. Here's your scholarly debate. Of the evening, was medieval weather prediction more accurate than we give it credit for? Some historians argue that thanks to generational knowledge and hyper-local observation, peasants could forecast weather better than nobles with scrolls and calendars. Others say they just got lucky. Often. But you believe in the wall. Back inside, you double-check the thatch for loose bundles. You wedge a log against the wobbly door, and you line your boots with dried moss because cold, wet feet are the enemy of joy. By nightfall, the wind has picked up. The daub wall creaks with every gust like a tired uncle telling war stories. But you're prepared. You've tucked garlic at the windows, just in case, weighted your cloak, and whispered a polite warning to the spider in the ceiling that things might get bumpy. You lie down and close your eyes, hand resting gently on the wall like you're saying thank you. For holding, for creaking, for speaking. Fun thought to end on. If smart homes had existed in the Middle Ages, they wouldn't have had Bluetooth. They'd have had Mudtooth a silent communication between man and clay. Your throat is dry. Not just I need water dry, but did I swallow a small linen pouch full of dust and shame kind of dry? You try to hum a tune to yourself, and it comes out as a cough with personality. Congratulations, you've caught the medieval version of a sore throat. No worries. You've got medicine. You reach under the pile of moss and regret that is your shelf, and pull out your emergency cure, a handful of dried holy grass tied together with horsehair and something that used to be green. You hold it under your nose and inhale. It smells like damp hay mint and the hope of better times. Before we talk about how your ancestors used Kothang to battle inflammation demons and unsolicited marriage proposals, take a moment to like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. And leave a comment with your favorite weird folk remedy. The stranger, the better. Now, you chew the tip of the grass bundle like you mean it. The taste is bitter. Bitter like disappointment. Tea with a splash of who approved this. It numbs your tongue slightly, which is promising and makes your eyes water in a way that feels vaguely medicinal. Maybe you're healing. Maybe you're becoming a tree. It's unclear. You sit by the fire rocking slightly, trying to remember the rest of the ritual. Ah, yes, the iron powder. From a tiny pouch tied to your belt, between the one for salt and the one for angry marbles, you retrieve a pinch of powdered iron. It's fine, dark, and sparkly. It was scraped from an old plowshare months ago and dried in the sun to chase out the wet demons, according to your neighbor who still talks to the moon. You toss the powder onto a flat rock you warmed by the fire. It sizzles, smokes slightly, and smells metallic, sharp, like sword breath. You hold your face over it and inhale gently. Instant regret, but your sinuses thank you. Or at least stop complaining long enough to let you breathe. Here's your historical tidbit. In medieval Europe, iron was believed to have healing properties. People carried iron nails as protection-placed blades under sickbeds, and even added small flakes to water or wine as internal armor. It wasn't about nutrition. It was about strength and fear of ghosts. Tonight's charmingly odd fact: there was a brief moment in Welsh folk medicine where mixing iron powder with powdered teeth, yes teeth, was believed to stop fevers. Whose teeth don't ask, just stir. You finish your smoke inhalation tea ritual, now fully teary-eyed and a little dizzy, and wrap your throat with a strip of linen soaked in vinegar and elderberry juice. It smells like foot salad. It helps. Maybe you also recite a small charm under your breath, not because you believe in magic, but because you'd rather not take chances when your only doctor is a sheep farmer named Thomas, who once misdiagnosed a broken leg as cloud in the bones. Here's your academic whisper of the night. Modern scholars are divided on how effective medieval folk cures truly were. Some argue that many remedies had antimicrobial properties. Others say the real healing power was psychological ritual repetition and the belief that someone had a plan, even if that plan was chew bark and hum at the moon. Back to you. You fall asleep that night with a warm stone at your feet, garlic by your bed, and the distinct taste of holy grass lingering on your molars. You dream of forests that whisper names and bonfires that sneeze. In the morning, your throat is slightly better, or maybe your expectations are just lower. Either way, you win. You greet the day with a raspy voice, a heroic yawn, and a sense of accomplishment. You defeated the darkness with herbs metal and pure willpower. Who needs antibiotics when you've got aggressively herbal tea and mild panic? Fun thought to end on. If medieval pharmacies existed, their shelves would be labeled mostly dirt. Probably works, and don't ask, just chew. You're burning. Not emotionally, though last night's garlic-fueled dreams of your ex throwing cabbages might say otherwise. No, this is physical. Sweaty. Pulsing. The kind of fever where your thoughts feel like they're wearing soggy boots. You're lying on a straw mat that now smells like wet goat and ambition. Your face is flushed. Your hands twitch. You attempt to sit up, but the weight of the blanket and probably your choices holds you down. It's time for the root. Before we plunge into the damp, bitter underworld of fever-fighting flora, please take a moment to like and subscribe if you find value in what we share, and drop a comment if you've ever eaten something that made your soul leave your body temporarily. Now let's dig. You send your cousin small, fast, and slightly sticky out to the hedge to gather wild fever root. You don't know its real name. No one does. It's that pale knotted root that smells like the back of a mule's throat and grows only in places that feel cursed. She returns with a bundle of it wrapped in moss. You sniff it. It immediately offends your brain. Perfect. You mash it in a bowl with a smooth stone, adding a splash of boiled pond water and a pinch of powdered dried apple skin for optimism. The result is a lumpy brown paste that looks like something you'd scrape off your boots and tastes worse. You don't sip it. You gulp. It burns going down. Not spicy, not hot, but aggressively herbal, like a plant is trying to fight back on the way to your stomach. You lie back and wait. Here's your historical tidbit. Many medieval people used fever-reducing roots, like willow bark yarrow or meadowsweet. Some were effective. They contained natural compounds, similar to aspirin. Others were effective only in making you too nauseated to notice your fever anymore. Same end result, really. Tonight's curious oddity. In some regions, people believed breaking the fever required complete silence. No talking, no sighing, no humming. Even your breathing had to be modest. The idea was that fever was a spirit-loud noise made it angry, and if you wanted it to leave, you had to shut up and pretend you weren't home. So you lie there, in silence, wrapped in 3 cloaks, sweating through your eyebrows, with a linen strip of soaked cabbage leaves around your forehead. Don't ask, and you do not speak. Your cousin offers you more water. You blink once. That's all. She nods solemnly and backs away, like you're royalty or radioactive. Or both. The wind rattles the window. A mouse squeaks. You remain still, a quiet bundle of suffering and stubborn hope. Your neighbor drops by with a blessing root, a tiny sprig tied with red string and dipped in wine. She whispers, "Place it on your chest and think about frogs." You do. Not because it makes sense, but because logic left your body 3 fevers ago. Now here's your scholarly whisper. Some argue that medieval silence rituals were less about superstition and more about rest. A way to force the sick into stillness, to give the body time. Others argue it was spiritual purging sin, inviting reflection. And let's be honest, after half a root and a bowl of bitter water, reflection is all you've got left. Back to you. You drift in and out. Time slows. You dream of walking through a root forest, every tree whispering a cure you can't quite hear. Then, something shifts. The sweat cools. Your limbs ache a little less. The headache is still there, but now it's just grumpy, not tyrannical. You wiggle your toes and realize they feel human again. The root worked, or the silence did, or you just outlasted the fever through sheer force of personality and cabbage wrap. Either way, you're alive. Later that night, you whisper your first words in a day I'm hungry. Your cousin cries. She's been waiting to make onion soup, which is either a reward or a new challenge. You'll find out. Fun thought to end on if medieval spas existed. They'd probably offer fever, root detox, silence immersion, served with a side of screaming tea and a complimentary forehead cabbage. You're not just hungry. You're the kind of hungry that makes tree bark look delicious. The kind of hungry that gives even the smallest pebble a seductive, maybe it's a nut energy. You've checked your root cellar. You've shaken the onion net. You even sniffed your neighbor's chimney to guess what they're eating. Answer turnip stew and secrets. But there's one trick left. Burnt bread powder. Before we dive into this questionable culinary masterpiece / psychological coping mechanism, please take a moment to like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. And leave a comment. What's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten? Because hunger whispered bad ideas into your ear. Okay, now let's char some carbs. You take the last remaining heel of bread from the shelf. It's hard, like could defend yourself against a bandit hard. You stare at it with the kind of longing reserved for lost lovers and ripe plums. Then you toss it straight into the fire, not as a tantrum, as a recipe. You wait. The bread blackens, then turns into a small, smoky piece of charcoal-flavored hope. You pull it out with tongs, or a stick, or your cousin's spoon, depending on what's cleanish, and let it cool. Then you grind it, with a rock, on another rock, like a caffeine-deprived squirrel. The crumbs fall into a bowl, dark, flaky, slightly spongy. It smells like survival. A little sad, but also a little noble. You add a pinch of salt, if you have it, maybe some dried mint, if you're lucky, and stir it with hot water. Congratulations! You've made poor porridge, also known as how to trick your brain into thinking you're full using soot and desperation. And here's your historical tidbit. In lean seasons, medieval families used burnt bread as a thickener, a faux drink base, and even as a topical paste to relieve stomach aches. The charcoal soot was believed to absorb hunger, both physically and emotionally. Which brings us to tonight's strange but true ritual, the starvation mask. Some people, especially children, were given a little poultice made of burnt bread and vinegar smeared across the forehead or chest. The belief that hunger lived in the eyes and mind, and that by applying something dark and absorbing the cravings could be pulled out. It didn't work. But it gave people something to do. And sometimes that's what survival really is, buying time with rituals until spring. You lie back by the fire face, dotted with a paste that makes you look like you fell asleep in a bakery explosion, and wait. The hunger fades. Not because you're full, but because you feel like you did something. You took action. You burned bread and wore it. That's commitment. Here's your scholarly debate. Whisper, was the bread-burning ritual actually medicinal? Or was it just a placebo with crunch? Some researchers point to the absorbent qualities of charcoal and how it may have eased digestion. Others say the true effect was mental, a small sense of control in a time where hunger was as common as mud. Back to you. You get up, paste crumbling from your cheeks, and feel weirdly better. Not full, but less empty. You even share a few spoonfuls of burnt bread porridge with your cousin who pretends to love it while secretly spitting it into the fire when you blink. Classic. The neighbor stops by and sees your face, nods, says good to see you've joined the burnt brigade. You nod back solemnly. It's not a secret club, but it should be. That night, you dream of banquets of cheese, apples roasted meat, and of someone gently patting your shoulder and saying, "Don't worry, the bread's only slightly on fire." Fun thought to end on: if medieval influencers had Instagram, their food posts would just be a bowl of ash with the caption, "Chachar full AF, Chachis blessed, bread but make it crispy." You wake up cold. Not just chilly, bone-deep time traveling makes your eyelashes crunch kind of cold. The kind of cold where even your fire refuses to cooperate, curling into itself like "not today, friend." So you do what any rational medieval person would do. You bury your shoes. Wait, hold on, don't leave. Before we dig into this particularly weird bit of home heating psychology, go ahead and like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. And tell me in the comments, what's the strangest thing your ancestors might have buried to survive winter bonus points if it wasn't a relative? Now let's talk about shoes and flame rituals. You grab your oldest pair, the ones that barely resemble footwear anymore. One of them has a toe hole so large you've started calling it a vent. The other creaks when it moves like it has opinions. Perfect. You head outside to the yard, frozen patchy, crusted with frost, and dig a small hole near the hearth wall. You whisper to the wind, let the heat return. Then you bury the shoes. No, you're not losing it. You're practicing one of the most bizarre, delightful, and desperate bits of folk fire lore in your region. The belief that burying old shoes near a hearth or under a chimney calls warmth back into the home. Why? Because warmth-like spirits respect sacrifice. Here's your historical tidbit of the evening shoes were seen as incredibly personal objects, absorbing sweat energy and even pieces of your soul, especially if you had particularly dramatic feet. In some traditions, burying or hiding shoes in walls was believed to confuse evil spirits or anchor protection in a space. Warmth, being both a comfort and a spiritual ally, was included in this logic. But why shoes, you ask? Because they've been places. They've touched earth fire, festival sorrow, marriage manure, and market. They are silent witnesses to your entire peasant resume. Burying them is like offering up proof to the elements that you've earned the right to be warm. Tonight's odd little fact: in parts of Northern Europe, it was customary to burn a scrap of shoelace during winter solstice to summon fire spirits or simply guilt the wind into leaving. And if the shoelace sizzled just right, it meant spring would come early. Or at least that you wouldn't freeze to death before your cousin's wedding. After the burial, you return indoors and sit beside your barely alive fire. You hum a little tune and feed it twigs. You rub your hands together. You offer it kind words and threats. And slowly, as if it heard you, the fire flares. Just a bit. Enough. Enough to say, someone saw your shoes and they are satisfied. Here's your scholarly whisper. There's debate over whether these fire rituals were purely symbolic or if they had psychological value, giving people a sense of agency when snow and cold stripped everything else away. Either way, a shoe in the dirt was sometimes the only act of faith a peasant could afford. Back to you. The room warms slightly. The frost on the window melts just enough for you to draw a smiling face with your finger. You wrap yourself tighter in your patch cloak and sip hot. Something could be tea, could be broth, could be the melted dregs of yesterday's onion water. You pretend it's delicious. You glance toward the fire. It crackles. You smile faintly. Your toes are still cold, but your heart isn't. You whisper to yourself, "Next year, I'll bury the left shoe first, just in case it works better." Fun thought. To end on, if central heating had existed, back then, people still would have buried shoes, just in the carpet, under the radiator, whispering, for tradition. You find it under the bed, a ball of fur, tangled with straw lint, and something that might once have been bread. You pick it up gingerly. It's soft, faintly warm, and clearly rodent hair. You sigh. You already know what must be done. You burn it, not out of disgust, though. That's fair too, but because this is how you make your own luck in a world where luck rarely visits. In the Middle Ages, sometimes the only difference between fortune and famine was whether or not you'd sacrifice something small and squeaky to the smoke gods. But before we explore the long-standing, slightly unhinged tradition of burning mouse fluff for good vibes, go ahead and like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. And comment below, what would you burn to reset your luck? Now back to the fluff. You carry it reverently to the hearth, nestle it on a dry chip of bark, and light it with a coal you scooped earlier, using a bent spoon and silent prayer. The ball smolders, then catches. It smells weird, like singed hope, like a hamster forgot to finish its business. But this, they say, is how you call in fortune, or chase off pestilence, or maybe just find a better fishing spot. Here's your historical tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, burning rodent fur, especially from mice or rats, was believed to ward off illness and misfortune. People would deliberately collect discarded mouse nests and burn them during hard winters, plagues, or bad harvests. The logic: rodents were carriers of bad omens. Their fur held bad luck. Turning it to ash made space for better things. Tonight's curious folklore twist. The ashes of burnt mouse hair were sometimes stored in little pouches and carried like a charm. If you wore it around your neck, it protected you from thieves. If you wore it near your ankle, it supposedly made you walk faster. If you ate it, well, let's not even go there. There's a reason recipes don't include rodent ash spice blend. You sit quietly by the fire watching the little puff burn. A cousin wanders by and raises an eyebrow. "Bad week," they ask. You nod. They nod back, understanding. You're not alone. Everyone in the village has at some point burned mouse fluff for luck, or plucked whiskers for blessing, or muttered at a rat skull while planting leeks. It's a kind of rural spirituality. Not organized religion, just localized chaos control. Here's your scholarly debate of the evening. Were these rituals, genuine belief systems, or just a form of emotional survival? Some anthropologists argue that rituals like this gave peasants a sense of power in an unpredictable world. Others argue they were simply born from boredom and the lack of Netflix. Honestly, probably both. Back to you. You scoop the ashes into a small walnut shell and blow on it gently, whispering the classic phrase, "Let no whisker curse this home." It doesn't rhyme, but it's comforting. You tuck the shell onto a beam in the ceiling, where it will collect dust and guard the space. Later, while you're mending a sock with holes in all the wrong places, you notice something. The draft has stopped. The leak from the roof has slowed. The soup tastes marginally less like wet firewood. Maybe it's just chance. Maybe it's just mouse fur. But something feels lighter. And you feel like you've participated in a long, strange tradition of trying to survive with equal parts dirt folklore and flammable optimism. Fun thought to end on. If fortune cookies existed in medieval times, they'd probably contain a single mouse whisker and the message, try burning this before breakfast. Trust me, you stare at it. A rock, not a metaphor. Not a fancy term for an heirloom cushion passed down through generations of stoic villagers. No, this is an actual honest-to-goodness stone, and it's your pillow. You lay it on your straw mat, adjust it so the flattest side is sort of horizontal-ish, and gently lower your head onto it, like someone settling in for a nap inside a quarry. It's cold, it's unforgiving, and it teaches you everything you need to know about neck pain in the 14th century. Before we lie down with history, literally go ahead and like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. And comment, what's the most uncomfortable thing you've ever used as a pillow bonus points if it had corners? Now back to the rock. It's not just any rock. You chose it carefully. It's about the size of a loaf of bread, with one corner worn smooth by time and desperate dreams. Some say sleeping on a stone builds character. Others say it builds vertebral confusion. You say it's the only thing in your home that doesn't collapse when you lean on it. But this is how many people actually slept in hard times, literally and figuratively. With flat stones, logs rolled up sacks of beans, or even bundled rope coils as headrests. Why? Because soft things attracted bugs. Soft things mildewed. Soft things were luxuries. Stone was reliable. You knew where you stood with a stone. Mostly very upright. Here's your historical tidbit. In many rural households, the pillow, if you had one, was often a wooden or stone headrest, especially in warm climates or places where insects were more feared than insomnia. Even in wealthier households, cushions were filled with straw or chaff and often placed just under the shoulders to elevate breathing, not cradle comfort. Tonight's delightfully terrible fact. Some folk remedies claimed that sleeping with your head on a stone kept demons from entering your dreams. Why? Because supposedly, spirits dislike corners. Makes you wonder how they felt about cubes. You shift your weight slightly. Crack. No, not the rock. That was your neck. A small adjustment. You tell yourself the popping sound is alignment. Your cousin looks over from the other straw mat and says, again, you're going to dream of square wheels. You nod, carefully, because tilting sideways now could mean waking up as a geometry experiment. Here's your scholarly whisper. Some argue that medieval sleeping habits weren't meant to be comfortable. They were meant to be brief. In 2 shifts, first sleep, and second sleep, with a waking hour in the middle where people prayed, stretched, or simply stared into the darkness like tired philosophers. Comfort wasn't a goal. Survival was. You lie perfectly still. The rock presses into your ear, like it's judging your life choices. But your shoulders stay warm, and your body remembers that this isn't about luxury. It's about stillness, the kind that makes the house stop creaking, the kind that lets the goat stop pacing, the kind that invites dreams through stubbornness alone. You think of your neighbor who sleeps with no pillow at all, just a folded apron under her head. Keeps me humble, she says. You believe her. She also eats raw onions and has never been sick a day in her life. As you drift, you begin to appreciate the stone. Its chill has softened. Your body adapts. Your mind accepts. The ache in your neck becomes familiar, like a lullaby in pain's key. Tomorrow, you'll wake up slightly lopsided. You'll roll your shoulders and swear softly into the fire. But tonight, you are resting. Not comfortably, but completely. Fun thought to end on. If memory foam existed back then, someone would have carved it from limestone and called it blessed softstone of neck alignment, patron of posture and regret. You don't sleep deeply tonight. Not because of your rock pillow. That particular neck betrayal has become strangely familiar, but because the wind is whispering again. Not gentle bedtime murmurs. No, this wind sounds like it knows your secrets, and it's asking questions. So you do what generations before you have always done. You reach under your mat and feel for the knife. The hilt is worn smooth. The blade is dull from years of slicing everything from cheese to curses, and yet it still carries weight, not just physical, but spiritual. Because this isn't just your eating knife, it's your underpillow protector. Before we unsheath the bedtime anxieties of the medieval soul, go ahead and like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. And leave a comment. What item would you keep under your pillow to feel safe in the dark? Now back to the wind. It's louder tonight, pressing against the thatch, rattling the door just enough to be noticed, not enough to be opened. A teasing wind, the kind that carries rumors and probably several varieties of lung problems. You lie on your back, one hand resting lightly on the hilt of your knife. Not out of fear exactly, but out of tradition. You were taught by your grandmother, your cousin, your neighbor, with the eyebrows of a prophet, that sleeping without a blade invites unwelcome visitors. Not human ones, other ones. Here's your historical tidbit. Many medieval people kept a small blade under the pillow or mattress, believing it would ward off spirits, nightmares, witches, and practically rats. Especially rats. Rats were everywhere, and they didn't respect boundaries. Tonight's strange, but true fact. In some regions, people would etch small protective runes onto their knives, believing that if a ghost or demon tried to enter the room, the metal would slice its spirit. This raises many questions, none of which are answered by physics, but all of which are answered by folk logic. You listen. The fire has died down. The house is silent except for the wind and your cousin's nasal interpretation of a goose. You shift slightly, adjusting the blade's position beneath the mat. It's close enough to grab quickly, far enough not to slice your ear in your sleep. A delicate balance. A nighttime calculus. You've never had to use it, but everyone knows someone who has. There's a story. Always a story about the girl who woke up with claw marks on her windowsill. The farmer who saw eyes glowing by the hearth. The midwife who dreamt of her dead sister and woke up with her braid tied in a knot. All of them slept without a knife. It's not fear. It's respect. Respect for the night, for what moves in shadows, for the possibility, however irrational, that you're not alone when the world grows still. Here's your scholarly whisper. Historians debate whether this blade tradition was born from real dangers like theft or animals, or deeper spiritual beliefs about thresholds, protection, and control. Some argue it was symbolic an act of reclaiming power in a powerless world. Others say it was a placebo with a pointy end. Back to you. The wind howls louder now. A gust rattles the shutters. You hold the knife without thinking, just for a moment, just to remember that you can. The edge bites gently into your palm, a reminder you're not helpless. You set it back down, wrapped in linen, facing east, like always. As you close your eyes, you whisper a phrase under your breath, something old, possibly made up, passed down through generations, like burnt bread and toe fungus. Steel above, peace below. No one remembers where it came from. Everyone still says it. You sleep, not deeply, but safely, or at least ritually. The knife sleeps too. And in the distance, the wind changes direction. Fun thought to end on. If modern security systems existed back then, they'd probably come with a free dagger and the slogan "Install under pillow." Sleep like no ghost is watching. So here you are. You've dug through ashes for warmth, sipped smoky rainwater, tied yourself to sleep, eaten roots that argued with your insides, and whispered charms to walls that creak louder than your knees. You've worn wool that itches like betrayal, slept on stones that judge your posture, and burned mouse fur as both warning and wish. And somehow, you made it, not just through one medieval night, but through all of them. The rituals, the resilience, the oddly charming dance of desperation and hope. A world where survival wasn't always graceful, but it was full of meaning even in the strangest places. A bowl of burnt bread, a shoe buried in frost, a knife hidden under your head. Because to live back then wasn't about thriving. It was about noticing. Noticing the warmth of a fading fire, the hum of silence between first and second sleep, the quiet power of doing the same odd, sacred thing your grandmother did not, because you understand it, but because it made her feel safe. And now, you rest. Not because you fixed everything, but because you don't need to. Some stories aren't about victory. They're about endurance. Quiet, messy human endurance. So tonight, whether you're curled up in a blanket or staring at the ceiling in a city full of hums, may you feel something ancient wrap around you. Something soft and scratchy and stubborn. That feeling. That's survival. That's your inheritance. That's the story. For tonight, may your dreams be filled with wonder and peace. Hey friends, tonight, let's explore the moment you stumble through the door of a medieval inn, a bit too hard, a bit too loud, and carrying just enough road mud to repaint the lower walls. The fire crackles, the stew bubbles with ominous optimism, and somewhere in the rafters, someone's already snoring or plotting. This is where your night begins. And no, you might not survive till dawn. So before you relax, take a second to like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your local time and where you're tuning in from. Are you in a castle, a cottage, a rented room, above a suspicious bakery? Dim those lights, fire up a fan for that cozy background sound, and let's settle in for the journey ahead. The door groans like it's holding a grudge, and you step inside the inn. You're greeted by two things: the sudden change in air quality, sweaty leather, and burnt onions, and the innkeeper's glance that says, "Don't sit on the good bench." There is, of course, no good bench, just one less cursed than the others. You try to look confident, like someone who doesn't just want soup and to not be mugged tonight. But your left boot betrays you. It slips, and suddenly you're horizontal on the floorboards. A tankard clatters somewhere in the distance, followed by a lone clap. Probably the bard. No one helps you up. In a medieval inn, falling is a rite of passage. If you survive the floor, you've earned your first cup of something hot and ambiguously meat-based. Behind the bar, The innkeeper grunts. Rain, he asks, as if your soaked cloak wasn't explanation enough. You nod. He pours something into a wooden mug that steams faintly and might be ale tea or boiled regret. Either way, it's warm. You take a seat gingerly on a bench that squeaks like a guilty conscience. Around you, the inn is alive with noise, a dog barking at its own tail, someone explaining loudly how swords are a metaphor for politics, and in the far corner, the deep musical belch of a man who has not chewed since Tuesday. It's not just noise, it's life. And the inn's wooden walls absorb every syllable like an eager gossip. You overhear someone stumble in behind you yelling, "Who stole my goat?" No one answers, but a faint bleating echoes from upstairs. You don't ask. The goat economy in inns is famously unstable. Your drink tastes like the color brown. You don't ask for specifics. Instead, you look around at the decor, 3 antlers, none matching a tapestry, depicting what may be a sheep jousting a cabbage, and a list of house rules written in Latin and despair. Suddenly a thud from the ceiling. You glance up, so does everyone else. Someone whispers, "That's just Joffrey trying to find his bed." The footsteps continue in random directions. You sip slowly, trying not to imagine a man sleeping in the rafters, surrounded by old boots and half a chicken. There's a table by the hearth, where a group of travelers are debating the merits of bathing. One insists it weakens the soul. Another counters that if he doesn't bathe, the fleas do it for him. You pretend not to eavesdrop, but your ears are traitors. Just then, a loud crash from the kitchen, followed by the cook shouting something about the cursed ladle again. No one flinches. Apparently, this happens often. Across from you, a woman dressed in 10 scarves begins reading palms. She tells a knight he will die in glory, a farmer he will die in debt, and a rat on the floor that it will die soon. The rat looks offended and scampers off to write a review. You get up to head to your room. Room 5, you think. The stairs creak like they're singing a sad ballad. You count doors. Room 4. Room 6. No 5. You spin in circles. The hallway groans as if laughing at you. Eventually, you find a small door labeled Y in faded paint. That must be yours. Inside a bed made of straw dreams and maybe some regret. A chamber pot, ambitious in size, and a single candle already dripping onto the table like it's trying to escape. You lie down. The mattress sighs beneath you as if both welcoming and warning. Outside the door, someone yells, "Who put socks in the stew again?" followed by a silence too deliberate to be innocent. As your eyes close, the inn continues its symphony, snoring like thunder, giggling from the common room, a chicken softly clucking in defiance, and the walls, they listen. They remember. They whisper every sound back, just a little offbeat, like a song that knows all the wrong lyrics, and you realize this inn is alive, and tonight it has decided to keep you company, maybe forever. Oh well, at least the bed's warmish. At some point in the very early hours, when the fire is just a warm sigh in the hearth, and the last drunken song has hiccuped into silence, you're awakened by the sound of something licking, not chewing, not breathing, licking, and it's disturbingly rhythmic. You sit up, slowly, because that's how you deal with unsettling medieval inn sounds. Quickly, just invites regrets and mysterious bruises. You stare at the door. The candle's gone out, but the moonlight filters through the cracks in the warped wood painting stripes across the floor, like you've been placed in some theatrical interrogation. The licking stops. You don't know whether to feel relieved or concerned that the walls seem to be holding their breath with you. Then comes a tiny thump, a muffled curse, something heavy being dragged, and a whisper. Not again. Hilda, not the bucket. You decide wisely to lie back down and pretend you've never had ears. This is just what happens after midnight in inns older than your family tree. And remember, in medieval times, that could mean 3 generations max thanks dysentery. Eventually, the noise fades, replaced by snores from neighboring rooms. Deep, satisfied nasal snores that rattle like bagpipes left in a damp cave. You count them. 3 snores, 1 wheeze, a gargle, and a meow. Yes, definitely a meow. You crack open the door. There in the hallway, a cat stares at you with the kind of judgment only medieval cats can manage. It's wearing what looks like a tiny cape made from someone's missing sock. You nod respectfully. The cat nods back. This is how power hierarchies are established in places like this. Downstairs, the inn wakes slowly. The smell of porridge mingles with ash old ale and a faint undercurrent of something suspiciously cabbage adjacent. You shuffle down the stairs, avoiding the 3rd step, which squeaks like it's trying to alert the local constable. At the common table, a man is already drinking. He sees you and raises his mug. Breakfast, he says. It's not clear whether that's the name of the drink or just his excuse. Either way, you nod. You order stew. The innkeeper nods like you've passed a test. Didn't scream last night. He notes pouring a bowl of something that bubbles threateningly. You're adjusting. The stew tastes like root salt and distant memories. You chew carefully. Very carefully. Something in here still has cartilage. To your right, a conversation begins about the ghost in room 3. Apparently, it hums lullabies in Flemish and smells like apples. Someone swears it helped him find his shoe once. Someone else says the shoe was never his to begin with. You smile awkwardly and sip more broth. A bard appears from a side door, hair-tousled eyes, sleepy lute missing a string. He starts playing anyway, singing a song about a girl who married a goose for its inheritance. It's oddly romantic until verse 6, when the goose runs away with a fox. Medieval folk songs are complicated like that. Behind the counter, the innkeeper begins polishing mugs with a rag that may be older than the building. He watches everyone like a quiet scribe recording misbehavior in the soft ledger of his mind. Or perhaps he just likes to guess which guests will skip out on payment. You notice a man with a large book at the end of the room. He's wearing spectacles tied behind his head with string and muttering to himself. This inn was a monastery, he says to no one, then a granary, then a brothel, then a tax office, then all 4 at once. He closes the book solemnly. It remembers. You don't argue. The inn, with its twisting hallways doors that vanish and reappear, and walls that creak with suspicious timing, does seem like it remembers things it shouldn't. And maybe it's not so much haunted as it is mildly opinionated. Later, you return to your room and find the straw in your mattress fluffed slightly. On the small table, a single beet has been placed beside your candle. A gift, a warning, a dietary suggestion. You place it in your satchel. Who turns down free produce? You overhear someone in the hallway arguing about whether chicken bones are suitable currency. Apparently, last night's dinner led to a high-stakes game of knucklebone dice, and now someone owes a duck. The innkeeper resolves the matter with a sentence that makes absolutely no sense. The duck eats first, always has. And that's that. Outside, the sun finally pushes through the clouds like a late apology. A traveler clanks by in mismatched armor, humming, and a cart rolls past carrying barrels marked fish. The question mark is intentional. It always is. You pack your things. The candle's stubby, and the mattress sighs in farewell. As you close the door, you hear a whisper. Come back. When the beat speaks, you turn, but no one's there. Probably just the wind. Or the walls. Again, you pay your tab in full, plus one extra coin for the goat, which seems to satisfy the innkeeper greatly. He even nods. As you step outside, the door shuts behind you with a soft thunk like the inn is taking a deep breath after holding it all night. And the sounds fade. The licking, the snoring, the ghosts humming about fruit, left behind. For now. But don't worry. The inn will be there tomorrow, with the same walls, the same whispers, and maybe one more beat. You told yourself you wouldn't come back. You meant it too. But here you are again, standing in front of the inn cloak, damp from a moody drizzle coin pouch lighter than it should be, and stomach growling like an excommunicated monk. You stare at the crooked wooden sign above the door. It swings in the wind and squeaks out a sound that's almost a laugh. Welcome back. The door opens with its familiar grunk, a sound like an old man reluctantly standing up. The same heat hits your face. Smoke, spice, meat, socks, possibly in that order. Inside, nothing has changed, except everything has shifted about half a foot to the left. The chairs are a little more wobbly. The dog is now inexplicably wearing a feathered hat. The same bard is still singing in the corner, but today he has a tambourine he clearly doesn't know how to play. He hits it like it owes him money. You spot the innkeeper polishing a mug with the same old cloth, which by now must be its own ecosystem. He sees you. He nods once. Room 5's still asking about you, he mutters. You left the beat behind. You freeze. You did leave the beat. You thought it was just a joke, a prank. But now, it's part of your record. You ask for stew. He nods again, disappears into the back, and returns moments later with a bowl of something that might once have been a rabbit, or the concept of a rabbit. It steams. It smells determined. You sit at the same bench as last time, except now it's on the opposite wall. You don't ask. The inn changes furniture like a bored noblewoman changes husbands. At the table next to you, a heated debate is unfolding about the morality of cheese. Yes, but when was it curdled? Someone demands, jabbing a finger at a suspicious wedge. Mid-Lent. That's heresy. Your heresy. Someone else hisses, then immediately crosses themselves. You quietly sip your stew. A chunk of something gelatinous drifts to the surface. You push it down gently. Some ingredients don't want to be seen. The walls creak in agreement. Suddenly the door slams open again, and in bursts, a knight armor splattered with mud expression wild. I need a juggler, he roars, and I'm willing to pay in buttons. Everyone pauses. Then slowly, a man in the corner raises his hand. I juggle geese, he says. The knight nods solemnly. Close enough. They leave. No one comments. Just another Tuesday. From above, you comes a soft, rhythmic banging. You remember room 3, the ghost with Flemish lullabies and a fruit-based scent. Someone whispers, "That's not the ghost. That's the nun again." You nod like you understand. You don't. A traveler enters with a loot case and a haunted look. He sits next to you without asking and whispers, "Don't order the turnip surprise. It's not what you think." You thank him. He orders it anyway. His eyes slowly glaze over, and he begins reciting the laws of tax collection in Latin. The walls are listening. You can tell. One beam above your head creaks a beat behind the others like it's clapping politely. The bard's song shifts into something eerie, minor chords lyrics about a fish that became pope and banned all soup. You're not sure if it's satire or autobiography. Near the fire, someone is whittling a spoon. They've been doing it for hours. There are now 17 spoons. No bowls, just spoons. You don't ask. A child runs past chasing a chicken who may or may not be enchanted. The chicken screams in French. You sip your stew faster. You overhear another table arguing whether the moon is a coin dropped by the gods or a giant wheel of cheese cursed by monks. A third theory suggests it's just lost. Everyone agrees not to go outside and check. In the corner booth, the inn's most ancient resident, a woman who hasn't blinked since the harvest festival of '08, suddenly speaks. "I saw the beat," she says. Everyone falls silent. The one from room 5. Even the fire crackles more quietly. "It moved," she says. "It hummed." She falls silent again. Doesn't move. Someone claps once. The mood resets. You decide to check on room 5. As you climb the stairs, they groan like they're warning you. You count the doors. 4, 6. Why still there? Inside, everything is as you left it. Straw bed, chamber pot, desperate candle. But now there's a second beat. Beside the first, they're touching. You back out slowly. No sudden movements. Downstairs, the stew is cooler now. Safer. You finish it in silence. The man with the turnip surprise has stopped blinking. You pay your coin. The innkeeper hands you a small folded piece of paper. You open it. A single word. Soon. You look up. He's gone. The fire flickers. You're not sure you'll sleep tonight, but the walls, they're listening. Tonight you choose to sit closer to the fire. Not too close, just enough for the smoke to cling lovingly to your clothes and ensure that all your future conversations will begin with, "Do you smell something?" But far enough that the singing chair with the suspicious stain doesn't end up under you again. The inn is full tonight. Not crowded, just full of stories and sounds and a few smells that defy classification. It's the kind of fullness that suggests someone somewhere brought a goat upstairs without asking permission. Again. Across from you, a young man with straw in his hair and panic in his eyes leans in. "They're meeting again," he whispers. "In the pantry." You don't ask who they are. You just nod, sip your watery mead, and brace yourself. The pantry, as it turns out, is not a pantry at all tonight. It's a secret gathering spot for the guild of extremely average alchemists. Their mission: to turn despair into soup. So far, they've made 4 kinds of broth and accidentally invented cheese again. One of them sees you peeking and throws a cabbage at the door to close it. The cabbage groans softly. You step away. Near the hearth, a man in a brown robe is teaching a group of small children how to bless bread with interpretive dance. No one questions this, especially the bread, which now looks oddly smug. Behind you, a pair of merchants is arguing over whether 3 rats in a tunic counts as a legitimate trade currency. One of them produces said rats. They squeak in unison, possibly rehearsed. You return to your stew. It's different tonight. Creamier, suspiciously round. The innkeeper notices your hesitation and says, "Don't worry. That's just oat chicken. Very rare. Only clucks during harvest moon." You nod slowly. You pretend to understand. The fire crackles in approval. Suddenly the door bursts open because of course it does, and in storms a drenched woman in armor made entirely of ladles. "Who stole my kettle?" she demands. Dead silence. One voice from the back mutters, "Check room 8. Everyone gasps. There is no room 8. Except there is. No one talks about it. You hear someone whisper, "That's where the soup speaks back." The woman with the ladle armor growls and disappears up the stairs. No one stops her. The bard changes songs. This time, it's a mournful tune about a duck who fell in love with a fish and the tragic consequences of incompatible gills. You don't know whether to cry or ask for the sheet music. At the far table, a man is selling fortunes. Not reading them, selling them. "You pick the future," he says, "and I'll tell you how much it costs." A cloaked stranger hands him a coin. "You'll step in something warm tomorrow. Can I pay extra to avoid that double the price to step in something neutral?" This is apparently the going rate for destiny. From the kitchen, someone screams, "It's boiling itself." No one moves. This is normal. You hear the walls whisper again. Not words, exactly just the subtle creaks of old wood trying to warn you or laugh at you. Possibly both. They've seen too much. They remember things you don't want to know. At the next table, a scholar is lecturing a chicken. The chicken takes notes. You briefly wonder if this is the next stage of education reform. The barmaid walks by with a tray of something that glows. You don't make eye contact. Glowing food never ends well. Someone asks you if you've seen the spoon thief. You haven't, but you realize one of your own spoons is missing. You didn't even bring a spoon. The fireplace lets out a cough, then a sigh, then a very clear You pretend that didn't happen. Someone else announces the goose trial begins at dawn. You ask what that means. They say nothing. You don't ask again. The man next to you, possibly a priest, possibly just someone with a lot of scarves, starts telling you about the miracle of the disappearing honey. You nod politely until he says, "It's under your chair now." You glance down. There's honey. There was no honey before. The candle flickers. The walls lean in. You sip your mead. A man runs past with 2 forks and a very determined expression. He's muttering about taxes. No one stops him. A group begins chanting something that sounds like pudding for the crown. You're not sure if it's a protest or a dessert. You decide to leave. But as you stand up, the stool beneath you sighs and says very softly, "Already." You freeze. You blink. No one else reacts. You slowly sit back down. The stew is cold now. The fire winks at you. The innkeeper slides a folded piece of paper in front of you again. You open it. This time it says, "Wait." So you do. The night continues, and the walls They keep whispering. The next night, you tell yourself you're just stopping in for a quick bowl of stew. You even say it aloud to the air, just a quick meal, in and out. But the air doesn't believe you. It smells of rosemary and regret, and also just faintly ink, like someone's been writing secrets again. You push open the inn door and are immediately greeted by a performance in full swing. A man is standing on a barrel reciting a dramatic monologue to a crowd of deeply uninterested pigeons. He bellows to be or not to be covered in plum sauce, and the pigeons seem unimpressed either way. Inside, things are only marginally calmer. A group of monks is playing charades. One of them is miming something that involves enthusiastic hopping and interpretive sneezing. The others shout, "Apocalypse bubonic plague." That time, Brother Marcus spilled the communion wine. Someone finally guesses feral goat diplomacy, and the monk nods solemnly. You squeeze past a barrel labeled "Definitely Not Pickled Ghosts" and find your usual seat by the wall. It creaks a little in greeting. You nod back. The inn has learned your weight, your habits, and possibly your mother's maiden name. The moment you sit, a waitress slides you a bowl of stew. You haven't ordered yet. "It knew you'd come," she says, winking. Then she walks away, with the exact same wink directed at a candle. You peer into the stew. It shimmers like it knows things. The broth is confident. Before you can taste it, a man in a feathered hat collapses into the chair across from you and whispers, "The curtains are watching again." You glance toward the windows. They don't have curtains. He vanishes before you can ask. The fire crackles like it's stifling a laugh. From the upper floor, the sound of argument spills down like flour from a broken sack. Someone is yelling, "You can't just rename history." And someone else replies, "Watch me. The treaty of cabbage shall stand." You sip your mead. Across the room, a group of traveling scholars has set up a betting ring. The contest predicting what the next item to fall from the ceiling will be. So far, the running guesses are one shoe, three buttons, a small song, or a duck wearing spectacles. The ceiling trembles in amusement. You feel the walls pulse just once, not maliciously, just to remind you they're there. Tonight the inn is unusually musical. There's a man tuning a harp that appears to be made of antlers. A small girl, with a surprisingly deep voice, sings a lament about a turnip that ran away from its feelings. And in the far corner, a bard is beatboxing with a hurdy-gurdy, which may or may not be legal. The innkeeper walks past with a bucket of what smells like existential dread and lavender. You don't ask. Then, without warning, the door slams open again. This time, it's a tax collector. You can tell because he's carrying a clipboard, wearing armor made of official stamps, and radiating the kind of energy normally reserved for mid-level bureaucrats and disapproving goats. He clears his throat. "I am here for the annual noise tax." Silence falls. He eyes the bard. The bard eyes the bucket. A single spoon clinks. "Too loud," says the collector. He scribbles something and drops a coin into a jar labeled "Forgiveness Fund." The spoon clinks again. Everyone jumps. Meanwhile, two elderly women in matching wool cloaks are playing a drinking game involving soup temperature and political subtext. One slams her bowl down and shouts, "Lukewarm stew equals monarchy." The other cackles and yells. Then mine is clearly a democracy in decline. They high-five. You finally try the stew. It tastes aware, not bad, just unusually introspective, like it's thinking about its past choices and hoping you won't judge. A whisper floats from the floorboards. The biscuits know too much. You blink. Pretend not to hear. Focus on your bread. But the bread looks back. Suddenly, a dramatic voice yells, "Clear the floor." Everyone scoots back as a man with very large shoes and an even larger scroll starts unrolling parchment across the entire room. Tonight, he announces we shall perform the dance of legally binding regret. Gasps. Cheers. Two snails are released at the front as honorary witnesses. You don't understand the rules, but it appears to involve hopping declarations of minor infractions and applause for every failed spin. The inn walls seem genuinely impressed. Someone near the stairs mutters, "Last time they summoned a mild inconvenience from the fourth dimension." Someone else mutters, "That was a very passive-aggressive cloud." Upstairs, another yell, "I ordered a room without whispering." A voice from inside replies, "Too bad. We upgraded you to haunted." The tax collector attempts to take notes, but accidentally summons a ghost in the form of a receipt. The receipt floats by, moaning about unpaid debts and spoiled soup. At this point, you decide to visit the washroom, which is labeled Uncertainties. Inside, a chalkboard offers you options: past regrets, current confusion, and future maybes. You pick current confusion, and a curtain opens to reveal a mirror that gently says, "You're doing okay. Drink more water." You nod. Back in the main room, the scroll dancer has become entangled in bureaucracy. The snails have formed a union. Someone hands you a cup of something warm and purple. It tastes like nostalgia and poorly stored nutmeg. You don't ask. Nearby, two young scribes are giggling over a list of banned phrases from last week's inn quiz night. You peek. Banned phrases include, "That's not canonically accurate for goats." "Technically, stew isn't a beverage." "You can't marry a weather phenomenon." You sip your purple drink and think, well, not with that attitude. A boy with a paper crown sits beside you and asks, "Do you think the tavern dreams?" You say yes. He nods, then whispers, "Last night it dreamt I stole its spoons." You both look at the missing spoon on your table. The wall sighs. The bard begins playing a haunting melody about a frog who wanted to be a carpenter. Several people cry. The frog, real seated near the bar, blushes. Outside, a bell tolls 13 times. Someone says, "That's not a good sign." Someone else says, "It means we've entered the bonus hour." Everyone cheers. The floorboards lift slightly. The lights dim, then brighten with enthusiasm. The innkeeper throws a handful of flour into the air and yells, "Let the bonus memories commence." A chorus of, "Oh no, not again," echoes from beneath the floor. This time, the whisper from the wall isn't even trying to be subtle. "Don't go upstairs. The bed remembers everything." You don't ask, but you do wonder what your bed remembers. Possibly your midnight snacks, and that one time you cried into a blanket after losing a spoon. The ceiling sighs. A tiny door in the corner opens. A mouse in armor waves at you. You wave back. You're not even surprised. You feel a folded note slide under your bowl. You open it. It says, "The walls, thank you." You smile. The inn breathes around you. The noise tax is forgotten. The stew finishes its emotional arc. And somewhere behind the chimney, someone whispers, "Same time tomorrow." You nod. Because you'll be back. You always are. You arrive at the inn on a Tuesday, which is not usually a dangerous decision unless it's this inn, and it's the third Tuesday after a rainstorm where someone swore at a goat. And someone always swears at a goat. Tonight, the sign hanging outside the inn reads in dripping charcoal, "No duels until dessert." You push the door open, and the warmth hits you like a pillow made of bread crust and bad decisions. The smell, half cinnamon, half sweat, half hope. Yes, it's three halves. That's just how the inn works. Inside, things are humming, literally. The floorboards are humming, a low thrumming sound like bees trying to sing madrigals while tipsy. You pause. Someone shouts from the rafters. It's starting again. You don't know what it is, but the walls seem giddy. You find your usual spot, the chair, that only creaks when you're emotionally vulnerable. It groans a little as you sit. You whisper a quiet apology. The chair accepts. There's no waitress tonight. Instead, the stew ladles itself. A spoon floats in midair, dips into a bubbling cauldron that glows faintly green, and pours a perfect bowl. It glides over to you, pauses dramatically, then sets itself down with a flourish. You clap. The stew burps. You take a bite. It's crunchy. You don't want to know why. Across the room, two jugglers are practicing something that might be acrobatics or might be a tax evasion strategy in movement form. One of them shouts, "The coins have rights," and the other throws a cabbage. It hits a painting. The painting yells, "Rude." You decide not to make eye contact with the art tonight. At the far table, the tavern's only silent monk is playing dice against a chicken. The chicken wins. Every time. The monk nods in respect and feeds the bird a grape. You suspect foul play, or rather foul play. Badum tss. A table near the back has gathered for what they call historical misquotes night. A man slams a mug and declares, as Joan of Arc once said, "YOLO." The table cheers. Another adds, "Martin Luther nailed it." A third, dressed as a cloud, mumbles, "I think Galileo said, vibe check." You sip your mead and pretend history never happened. Then the floor hums again, louder this time. The patrons fall quiet. The innkeeper steps onto a barrel and shouts, "Ladies, gents, and undetermined spirits." It is time, a collective breath, for the great tap dance of truth. Half the room groans. The other half stands on their chairs and start chanting, "Truth, truth, truth, you are confused." The innkeeper claps twice, and every table slides back on its own. Chairs shuffle politely. The candles form a semicircle. A trap door opens in the center of the room, and out comes a man in clogs. His outfit is part jester, part philosopher, part angry taxidermist. He begins tapping, and the floor responds. Every stomp echoes with a word, a syllable, a sound from deep in the wood's memory. You hear betrayal, turnips, laundry day. The duck wasn't real. Mild regret. Someone behind you whispers, "The S floor remembers everything." The clogman begins to move faster. The tempo rises. The walls vibrate. Somewhere a lute begins weeping. You feel your spine harmonizing with the floorboards. Someone falls into a trance. A bard yells. He's unlocking the memories of the pub. Then the voice of the building itself. Soft, low, but definitely. There whispers from the walls. We remember the secret wedding beneath table 4. We remember the eel duel of '78. We remember when someone tried to pay with a haiku. A pause. And we forgave it. The room breaks into applause. The clogman collapses exhausted. The trap door swallows him whole. The floor is quiet once more, humming only faintly. The stew gurgles in approval. Then you hear it, a whisper behind the bar, soft sliding like a sentence sneaking through time. The walls wrote a song today. The bartender nods, a sea shanty. Another voice about betrayal and cheese. Someone lights a candle. It flickers into a melody. The inn begins to sing. Not the people, the walls, the floors, the beams, the door hinges. You realize every creak, every groan, every crack in this place is a note, a tone, a living memory. The song is hauntingly beautiful. It tells of a sailor who fell in love with the moon, of a locket buried beneath the fireplace, of soup that never cooled. The ceiling sighs at the chorus. You sit still, stunned. Your stew tilts toward your ear, as if to listen. When the song ends, no one claps. Not out of disrespect, but because it would be rude to interrupt silence that soft. Then the regular noise returns. A spoon hits the floor. A laugh bubbles in the corner. Someone hiccups in harmony. The wall behind you whispers. You hum when you sleep. You choke a little. Don't you reply aloud. You do, the wall insists, sounding almost smug. The tune changes with your dreams. You decide not to argue with architecture. Then the innkeeper appears beside you suddenly. He looks tired, but kind. You ever wonder why this place remembers so much, he asks. You nod, mouth full of warm, sentient bread. He leans in. Because no one else does. He pats your shoulder, then vanishes back into the candlelight. You sit there for a long time. The table breathes beneath your fingertips. The chair shifts to hold you a little better. The wood seems warmer now, more forgiving, as if it has heard all your secrets already and isn't interested in judging, just humming them into something softer. The last patron leaves. The inn quiets. The candles dim to their softest glow. You get up to go. The wall beside the door whispers, "Same time next week." You smile, and you hum. You walk in just as dusk settles. The cold creeps past your too familiar with dampness cloak. The wooden sign above the door sways slightly, carved with the question, "Who stole my tankard?" A question likely posed long before the patrons could even pour their drinks. You push the door open, stepping into a room thick with memory. A man by the door lifts his arm mid-reach for the bottle, then turns to you. He straightens with a grin and mutters, "Ah, it's you. Don't worry. That jug still owes you a drink." Then he smiles in that tired way people do when they've settled their bar tab with sorrow one too many times. Smoke curls from the hearth like a blanket of burnt pine and stale hope. The fire crackles, giving off a heat that doesn't just warm your hands, it presses something into your thoughts. And today, the flames don't seem to be silent. They seem to whisper. Now and then, you hear something, maybe from the stone wall encircling the fireplace, saying, "We remember." You eye the hearth, suspicious and intrigued. You take the nearest seat, one that creaks softly, like it recognizes your weight. A piece of waxed parchment nearby shifts on its own, like it too has something to say. A wooden spoon clatters from a table not far away, a thud like a sigh. People glance around, some suspecting drink, others ghosts. You purse your lips. Ghost or not, the wall clearly heard it. The first thing you realize tonight is this: someone always wakes you from sleep here. But today, it's not footsteps, not laughter. No, it's a whisper from under a table, perhaps saying, "Truth always dances once before it sinks." You exhale and reach for a mug of mead, that cloudy drink of fruit and mystery laced with a hint of mint. The moment your lips touch the rim, you hear a faint voice from the left-hand wall. "Thank you." You turn, but no one notices. That spot on the wall might be speaking on behalf of someone else. The room's unusually full tonight. A cluster of merchants huddles over a table, whispering about lost silver chests, hidden compartments, and real suspicions. Their hushed tones are thick, and the walls seem to absorb each word. You can practically smell melted coins. A scholar, who may or may not have arrived through a secret trapdoor, scribbles something into a notebook with odd symbols. He says aloud, "These walls have seen more duels than dinners, at least 2 secret romances, and enough mispoured mead to drown a bishop." He tips his hat as if saluting the ghosts of regrettable decisions. You wonder if the wall answers. The fire flickers as if to say, "It's all recorded." At the back of the room, a barmaid ladles out a thick greenish stew that steams like an omen. She lowers the bowl before a guest and whispers, "Different recipe tonight." The guest glances your way, like he's about to be punished. You're too familiar with new recipes here to offer sympathy. Another group huddles near the foggy window, playing a game called Answer the Wall. One by one, they place their palms on the stone, close their eyes, and recite whatever they hear. The tankards exile a night without sleep. A snail eats the last coin. Each time the wall replies with a creak from the floorboards, a sound not unlike a snail whispering back. You don't join in, but your fingers feel cold, as if they remember something that never made it to words. Then comes a laugh, a child's laugh, delicate and wrong, and echoing through a tavern that hasn't welcomed children in decades. It's laced with the chime of glass. No one looks over. But a draft passes the back of your neck. From the right wall, you hear, "You're not afraid, are you?" You murmur, "Not exactly." The wall seems amused. A small hums beneath the stone. The bartender reappears with a new drink and says, "This is banana wine, fermented as the wall advised." You squint. You're sure there have never been bananas here? But then you remember the wall whispered yesterday, "Sweet things grow where nothing should." You sip. The taste is oddly prophetic. You fall quiet, listening for what else the wall might say. And this time, you hear it clearly. Truth flows like lukewarm stew. A log drops in the fireplace with a sigh. You glance down. A glowing coal has rolled toward your boot. It doesn't burn, just warms. You bend to pick it up, and in your head, you hear final reminder, "Remain steady." You freeze. As you stand, a floorboard beneath you hisses softly. Important things fall between levels. You look around, but no one else seems to notice. The conversation resumes. You've simply been hearing better. One table near the shadows speaks in hushed tones. "The wall said something tonight." The man in the hood nods. "Check the grain between the beams." People laugh softly, but their eyes remain grave. They believe. Suddenly, a guest shouts, "Did anyone else hear?" Singing, silence falls. A moment later, from the heart of the fireplace comes the faintest lullaby. No words, just melody, soft and ancient. You don't breathe. The flames shrink as if held by invisible hands. Yet the song continues, through smoke, through timber, until the final note falls like a leaf and the fire returns. Something has shifted. The wall isn't just listening now. It's reaching. You gulp. Try to raise your mug. The mead tastes like memory. The voice from the hearth purrs. The world moves on. But we remember. Another ember cracks. You look again. The coals seem to blink. One winks at you. Or you think it does. You rise. The legs beneath you are heavier than expected. Something's pressed into your boots. Not guilt, not fear, just weight. You move toward the door. Guests turn slightly. They all look changed, like they've shared a secret they can't speak aloud. You open the door. Cold air slaps your cheek. But behind you, a voice from the timber calls softly. Don't forget we sing when you're gone. You pause. You lift your gaze to the thin veil of stars above. The lullaby echoes in your chest. You tilt your head and whisper, I'll come back. A breeze curls around your coat from the direction of the inn. Like a promise with no form. You step away, feet brushing earth softened by centuries. You are lighter now, and somehow, you know, the wall will wait for you tomorrow or someday. It will still be singing. You shouldn't have come back so soon, but there you are, wet windswept cheeks stung by a drizzle that feels more personal than meteorological. You push open the crooked door of the inn with that familiar squeak that sounds like it's protesting your life choices. Again, the air is damp inside, not from weather, but from argument. You don't see it at first, but you can feel it, the tension hanging in the beams, like steam from boiled onions. Something happened today. The floorboards buzz with the scent of judgment. You take one step in, and you hear it. A loud thwack, followed by a scandalized oof, and the unmistakable clatter of a wooden spoon being dropped in rage. You freeze. Welcome to the courtroom. Not an official one. Those wear wigs and smell of wet parchment. No, this court is more pungent. This is the chamberpot courtroom, an unofficial, all too frequent tribunal, hosted somewhere between the hearth and the hallway, always presided over by the self-declared inn jury. 3 drunk weavers, 1 barefoot monk with opinions about everything, and Gertrude, whose job is unclear, but whose gavel is a ladle. Tonight, the case concerns a crime so severe, so egregious, so deeply medieval, that it must be judged with immediate loudness. The crime. Someone used the wrong chamber pot. You take your seat slowly, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping badger. Gertrude is already pointing the ladle at a quivering man in a green doublet. You did what Bernard she bellows. He gulps. I thought it was the public pot. There's a collective gasp. You glance around the room. Everyone has an opinion, and none of them involve mercy. A man with only one eyebrow leans toward you and whispers, the pot in question was cleansed with rosemary last week. Rosemary. He's nearly shaking. And he sat on it like it was the town square. Another man pipes up, justice must be served preferably in a mug and scalding hot. Sit down, Oswin says. Gertrude, that's your solution to everything. The inn walls seem to shiver slightly. The wooden beams creak. not with age, but with disapproval. You could swear the north-facing wall mutters something like, "This again." The fire spits in agreement. Gertrude slams her ladle on a table, which wobbles but stays upright, unlike most of the jury. "Let the trial commence," she cries, tossing a stale bread roll into the air, which everyone agrees is a perfectly symbolic opening. Someone stands to present the prosecution. It's a goat. No, wait. It's a man named Clem, who looks remarkably goat-like and has been chewing the same piece of straw since last autumn. "Ladies and gents, and various yeast infections," he begins, "we stand upon the brink of sanitary ruin. This inn has rules. This inn has traditions. And this man," he gestures toward Bernard, as if unveiling a demon, "has defiled the private chamber pot with his unworthy backside." Another gasp. You sip your mead quietly. It tastes a little like guilt. Or lavender. Hard to tell. Bernard defends himself meekly. There were no runes. No carvings. How was I to know it was Gertrude's? From the wall behind the fire, a low rumble sounds. It was lavender scented. Everyone freezes. You stare at the wall. No one else says anything. You lean to the person next to you. Did that wall just speak? They nod solemnly. It always sides with Gertrude. The courtroom continues. Now a witness is called. It's the stable boy, who apparently saw Bernard exiting the chamber with the gait of a man freshly emptied. Describe the expression Gertrude demands. "Serene," the boy says, gasps again. Someone faints. Or maybe lies down for dramatic effect? It's unclear. The bartender, having seen this too many times, simply keeps cleaning a cup that hasn't been empty in 10 years. You glance his way. He shrugs and mutters, "Wait till they reach the sentencing." The sentencing. A new voice enters the trial. It's Agatha the knitter, a woman known for speaking in proverbs and occasionally hexes. She stands, one eye permanently squinted. "I have heard the wall," she says dramatically. "What did it say?" Everyone whispers. She clears her throat. It said, "If he sits where lavender dwells, let him carry its burden." Silence. Then murmurs, "The curse of the lavender seat." You want to say this is ridiculous. You really do. But deep down, you know somehow that you should never cross the wall's scented pot. Bernard collapses to his knees. "I didn't know," he cries. "I thought it was public porcelain." Everyone stares. Porcelain, someone scoffs. This is an inn, not a cathedral. Gertrude rises. Her gavel ladle gleams in the firelight. "I hereby sentence you to a week of latrine scrubbing using only your hat." "No," Bernard cries. And she adds, "You must carry the lavender pot, unemptied, for the duration of your stay." The room bursts into applause. Somehow, you are clapping too. You don't know why, but this feels like justice. Later, as Bernard walks solemnly past carrying the decorated chamber pot with both trembling hands, the wall behind the fireplace hums again. Every pot tells a story. You believe it. In the corner, someone plays a single note on a lute. It sounds like regret or minor indigestion. The inn returns to its usual chaos. You finish your drink and rise. As you pass the chamber pot, now hanging on Bernard's belt like a cursed relic, you nod politely. "May your seat be ever public," you whisper. He smiles through tears. "Thank you." And somewhere in the beam above, a little creak sounds like laughter. You should not be awake right now, and yet here you are, sitting in the shadow of a half-dead fireplace, staring at a pewter mug that seems to have betrayed your trust. The mug is empty. It was full just moments ago. That's what the ale does. It disappears like time sense and dignity. Outside, the wind howls with the kind of commitment you wish your ex-apprentice had. Inside the inn is dim, not quiet, never quiet, but soft, like a tavern trying to whisper after shouting all day. The floorboards murmur beneath boots and regrets. Somewhere above, a plank groans like an overworked monk. And behind you, just barely, the walls listen. You're not alone. A group has gathered by the hearth. 5 men, 4 beards, and 1 woman who could outdrink all of them. They're on their 7th toast. You turn slightly to listen. To the boar that escaped, shouts the man with the curly mustache. To the trousers it ruined another responds. To never wearing those, again, says the woman, raising a mug with pride and maybe bloodstains. They drink. Someone hiccups. Someone else pledges eternal loyalty to a chicken that saved his life. You're not entirely sure, but you think they've started the oath hour, a sacred tradition born not from law or religion, but from barley and boredom. It always starts the same way. Someone says something ridiculous. Then someone else swears an oath to it. Then someone else swears an even bigger oath to something completely unrelated. And before long, everyone is bound by vows no one will remember at sunrise. You shift closer, not too close, just within earshot. The curly mustached man stands. He places a hand over his chest with grave sincerity. I vow, he says, swaying slightly, to defeat the beast of Mill Pond with only a spoon. There's a pause. Then roaring approval. Someone throws a sausage into the fire. You're unsure if it's part of the ritual. The woman stands next. She's fierce-freckled and possibly part mythical. I swear to learn the language of ducks, she declares, and negotiate peace between the marsh clans. More cheering. You sip from your mug, forgetting it's empty. The air tastes like burnt wood and ambition. Then silence. They turn to you. You freeze. Me. The wall behind you creaks knowingly. Yes, stranger, says the woman. What is your oath? You're not prepared. You hadn't planned to join a midnight tribunal of alcohol-fueled promises. But here you are. You clear your throat. I vow to finally fix the hinge on my door. A beat of silence. Then praise someone shouts. A mug is banged on the table. The dog under the bench barks approval. Someone weeps. My uncle never fixed his hinge, they say. He lived in draft for years. You're part of the circle now. There's no escape. Only refills. From the back room, the innkeeper appears half asleep, half annoyed, all in his nightcap. He looks around, mutters something about oath season, and retreats without another word. The woman has taken up a drum. You don't know where it came from. Perhaps it lives here, awakened only for moments like these. She begins to chant. To the moonlight, we swear. To the soup that won't share. To the boots full of rain. To the cousin of pain. We will not fall. We will not crawl. We'll drink till dawn, or not at all. It rhymes in the way that only drunk courage can. The curly mustached man takes off his left boot and raises it like a goblet. To my first love soup, everyone cheers. You don't ask. The woman turns to the wall behind the hearth and places her hand upon it reverently. Do you hear us? O beams of binding. You wait. And then the wall creaks. Swear to the gods, the wall responds. We. That's all it says. But it's enough. They all fall silent. It is known in this inn that walls are old and have opinions. And after enough ale, those opinions creak their way into sentences. A man in the corner stands. He hasn't spoken all night. His hair is silver, and his eyes have seen too much rain. He holds his mug like a relic. I swear, he says slowly that I will write the greatest poem ever known about cabbage. No one laughs. They rise, one by one. A toast to the cabbage epic. They clink mugs with sacred seriousness. You realize this is less of a bar and more of a bardic parliament. Someone scribbles the oath onto the wall. With a bit of charcoal cabbage, ye shall be sung. In the far left beam, you hear a sigh, a dreamy sigh, as if even the architecture has become sentimental. Now it's your turn again. You rise, unsure what you'll say. I swear you begin voice hoarse from history to never drink the yellow mead again. The room gasps. The honey-flavored one, someone whispers. You nod solemnly. I saw things. There is a long silence. Then slowly, the woman bows her head. We honor your survival. You are not alone. Others join in. I too saw the bees, says one man. I married one, says another. The room breaks into soft laughter. It's almost morning. The fire is embers now. The oaths have been made. The mugs are empty. Except the silver-haired man's. He's still whispering lines to the cabbage. As the group begins to scatter like dreams at daybreak, the curly-mustached man taps you on the shoulder. Don't forget the hinge, he says. I won't. He nods solemnly. A door must know closure. You believe him. As you retreat to your room, the stairs wobble like a drunken philosophy student. Your head is light, your promises heavy, and your feet uncertain. And just before you close the door, you hear a sound from the wall beside your bed. Keep your word, or I squeak tonight. You nod. Even the walls are watching. You didn't mean to end up in the broom closet. In fact, you're not entirely sure how you got here. One moment, you were looking for the outhouse, and the next, you pushed open a crooked wooden door and found yourself surrounded by mops buckets and a damp robe that smells like a monk's regrets. It's dark, except for a tiny slit of moonlight that filters through a knothole in the door. The air is thick with dust mildew and the kind of secrets that can only survive in tight quarters. And you're not alone. You realize this only after a sigh emerges from somewhere beneath the shelf labeled Turnips Cursed. The sigh is long, theatrical, and distinctly human. Is this the confessional? A voice whispers. You hesitate. Not exactly. Good, they whisper. That means I can be honest. You blink. You should leave. You should absolutely leave. But you don't. Instead, you slide down next to the stranger, your shoulder brushing against a mop that might be sentient. The mop doesn't object. The stranger, a wiry figure with what seems to be 3 scarves and a pouch that jingles with unspent sins, begins to talk. I once stole a pie from a baker, they say, but I returned it half-eaten because of guilt. Also, the crust was dry. You nod solemnly. Tragic. I kissed the tax collector's niece at the harvest dance, they add. She smelled like goose feathers and wine. That's either charming or deeply confusing. The voice shifts quieter now. I told my brother I didn't want the farm, but I do. I want the whole soggy thing. I want the turnips. I want the goat that screams at me in Latin. You stare at them. Your goat speaks Latin, a pause. Only during storms. You try not to smile. There's something about the broom closet, its musty womb-like silence, its smell of fermented chores that seems to invite honesty. It is in a strange and soggy way, sacred. And then they say it. I miss my grandmother. The words are soft, heavy. She used to sing to the bread before baking it, swore it made the crust kinder. You don't laugh. Instead, you say my grandmother used to whisper to her shoes. She claimed they'd walk straighter if they felt loved. Did they only slightly? The two of you sit there in the silence between broom bristles and old secrets. It's peaceful and odd and beautiful in the way that only broom closets at midnight can be. Then another voice joins in from behind the shelves. Is this the confession line? A raspy voice asks. You jump. So does your companion. A third figure steps into view wearing a burlap tunic and holding a candle that smells like fish oil and shame. The new arrival plops down beside you both. I once used holy water to wash my socks, they confess. They smelled divine. Someone gasps. It might be the mop. The first confessor smiles. Welcome, brother. The closet now contains a growing congregation of the mildly guilty and the extremely tired. Someone passes around a tiny flask of something that tastes like nutmeg and regret. And then you're talking. You don't mean to, but you do. You speak of the time you pretended to be a chimney inspector to get out of a marriage proposal, of the lost letter you never delivered, of the hedgehog you named after your old teacher and still talk to when life gets complicated. No one judges you. In this dim wooden cocoon, there is only acceptance and splinters. More join. The blacksmith's apprentice who once kissed the mayor's boot on a dare. The tanner's wife who regrets not pursuing her dream of becoming a juggler despite her lack of coordination and depth perception. Even the innkeeper who claims he only came in looking for a mop and ended up confessing that he sometimes waters down the ale with tears from a very emotional duck. You all nod in understanding. By now, there are 7 of you. 8 if you count the broom. The stranger with the 3 scarves clears their throat. Let us create a rite. Everyone quiets. A rite of small confessions, of whispered truths and half-finished dreams. We shall call it the sacred spillage. Someone claps. It's muffled. The candle flickers like it approves. You form a circle, well more like a wonky oval, and one by one you speak your truths. I lied about knowing how to read. I've been guessing at menus for years. I said I loved the play. I didn't. It was 3 hours of mimes and coughing. I keep a rock under my pillow. Not for protection. I just like the weight of it. And then someone says it. I'm scared I'll never be more than what I am. Silence. You feel that one. Everyone does. The broom tilts gently in agreement. Then the tanner's wife reaches out and squeezes their hand. That she says makes you more than most. And you all sit there, not to fix things, not to solve the world's woes, but to listen, to witness, to let each other exist in the fullness of your absurdity, your quiet longing, your ancient ache for meaning. Eventually the candle dies. The sacred spillage is over. You all crawl out of the closet slowly, like new creatures blinking into a confusing, slightly drunk dawn. Someone sneezes. Someone else hands them a turnip in solidarity. You never learn most of their names, but you know their truths, and they know yours. And that's enough. As you head to your room, you pass the hallway wall, the one beside the broom closet. And as you do, you hear a low creak. Not loud, not clear, just a tiny familiar voice from the wood itself. You're not alone. You smile, and you believe it. You always know when someone leaves without paying. It's not the sound they make, but the absence of sound. There's no clink of coin on counter, no murmur of keep the change, followed by the rustle of badly sewn coin pouches. No overly polite thanks to the innkeeper's cat, who doesn't care, but likes the attention. Instead, there's silence, suspicious silence. Tonight, that silence follows a man in a red velvet cloak who orders the best stew, drinks the best ale, and tells a story so wild, so impossibly full of dragons and scandalous duchesses that half the inn leans in to listen. He gestures broadly. He laughs with his whole chest. And every so often he pulls out a coin to flip between his fingers. It shines. It twirls. It never lands. You watch him through the crack in the wall where the plaster gave up years ago. The wall sighs, creaks, and listens with you. The man winks at the barmaid, says he's a minor noble, says he's here to buy land, says he has business in the city that involves spices, camels, and a misunderstood prophecy. He drinks. He eats. He doesn't pay. At the end of the night, he slips out. No clink. No jingle. No thank you for the roast turnips, madam. They reminded me of my childhood, and also my many regrets. Just the sound of boots on old wood. Then the door. Then nothing. The wall hears it, feels it, and it knows. You lean close. Press your palm to the wood. Another one you whisper. A groan answers from deep within the beams. The wall remembers all of them. The smooth talkers, the fake priests, the performers who promised a puppet show and vanished with the cheese tray. The worst ones don't even lie. They just smile and walk out, leaving behind the scent of disappointment and unwashed promises. The innkeeper, of course, pretends not to notice. He polishes the bar with slightly resentful grace. The barmaid rolls her eyes and mutters something about velvet being a poor substitute for currency. Even the cat looks insulted, but no one chases him. Not yet. Because in this inn, sometimes the walls handle things. Later that night, you hear it. The wind picks up. Shutters rattle. A gutter coughs, and then faint footsteps returning. Cautious, wobbly, maybe regretful. The door creaks open. Back already, the wall murmurs. The man steps inside velvet cloak, now damp and clinging. He's trying to look casual, but you see it. A slight tremble in his fingers, a glance over his shoulder. The absence of coin still clings to him like a sour smell. He sits again, says nothing. The innkeeper pours him water without asking. The barmaid slides a bowl of something gray and steaming across the counter. Mystery gruel, reserved for thieves, poets, and penitents. And the man eats it, silently. The wall is satisfied, but just a little. Because the truth is, the walls don't want money. Not really. They want the weight of it, the ceremony, the acknowledgement that what was given must be returned. Without that, things unravel. Without that, the balance shifts, and you begin to hear other things, like the whisper of unpaid bread loaves lamenting their wasted crust, like the drawer that now sticks when opened as if protesting its unpaid work, like the broom that refuses to stand upright, bent in sorrow for the unpaid cleaner's lunch. Small things. But walls notice. You've begun to see the signs. A spoon goes missing. The ale sours too fast. A rat stares at you with what you can only describe as moral disappointment. It always begins this way, until someone makes an offering. And it doesn't have to be much. A song sung honestly. A thank you muttered into wood. A copper coin left quietly under a mug pressed flat from guilt and sweat. But tonight, the man leaves nothing. Again. No clink, no bow, no apology, just a full stomach and an empty path. And this time, the wall does not forgive. You hear it groan, not the usual groan of old wood. This is sharper, purposeful, like a decision has been made. You run to your usual hiding spot, the pantry alcove near the fireplace, where mice leave crumbs of gossip. You press your ear to the stones. The man outside is walking fast now, cloak flapping, then a stumble, then a pause, then a thud. The wall exhales. You wait, longer than usual. Finally, someone drags him back in. It's not the innkeeper. It's not the barmaid. It's not even the cat. It's the wall. Well, not literally. That would be silly. But the man's cloak is torn, as if snagged on angry nails. His boots are muddy with footprints that loop back on themselves. His hair is tangled with cobwebs in the shape of ancient invoices. He's awake. Barely. And he's crying. Not out of pain, out of guilt. You don't ask questions. You don't need to. The wall saw the debt, and the wall collected. The man reaches into his cloak and pulls out something small. It's not gold. It's not silver. It's a tooth. His own, maybe. Possibly someone else's. You don't want to know. He places it on the bar. Trade, he mutters. The innkeeper nods, as if this makes perfect sense. The wall creaks once softly, and balance is restored. You learn something important that night. It's not the coin that matters. It's the offering, the intention, the act of saying, I see you. I value you. Here's something in return, even if it's a tooth. Especially if it's a tooth. The next morning, the sun filters in through dusty windows. The floorboards are quiet. The broom stands straight again. The cat curls up on a paid-for pillow and purrs like debts have been erased. You place a small rock on the windowsill. Not because you owe anything, but because the wall has been kind to you. And kindness deserves return, even if it's just a smooth stone and a whispered thank you. Because in this inn, the walls may creak, moan, and sometimes bite, but they always listen, and they never forget who paid. You notice it before anyone else does. It's not dramatic. There's no shattering crash or scream of thief echoing through the rafters. No bard strumming a suspicious chord. No chicken squawking as an accomplice. Just a small absence. The kind of absence only someone who talks to walls would notice. The tankard is gone. It was always there. Third shelf, from the bottom left of the salt barrel, perched slightly off kilter, as if it had opinions. Pewter dented, engraved with the words, "To Gert, may the ale never run out." Though no one at the inn remembers who Gert is, or was, or might have been, but you remember. Because you see it every day. When the fire is low. When the laughter has dimmed. When you sneak crusts from the larder and whisper gossip to the furniture. It was part of the rhythm. And now the shelf tilts with loneliness. You press your ear to the wall behind it. The wood hums with confusion. Not anger yet, but a sort of puzzled irritation. Like someone took the punchline from a well-worn joke, and now the room doesn't know how to finish its laugh. You check under the chairs, behind the curtains, in the fireplace just in case someone tried to make symbolic soup. Nothing. The tankard has vanished. And that's a problem, because that tankard, old dented overly proud, was an anchor. Not for people, but for the stories. You see objects in the inn do more than hold drinks or creak under bottoms. They remember. That tankard, it once caught a spilled confession of forbidden love. It heard two monks argue about cheese-based philosophy. It survived the great bar fight of 4 Tuesdays ago, and now it's gone. The chairs murmur in confusion. The floorboards creak in accusation. The cat stares at the empty space, then at you, then back at the space. You understand. It's the feline equivalent of, well, are you going to do something about this? Or just stand there like a decorative goose? So you begin the investigation. You start as all good medieval investigations do, by sniffing the air. You like to think it makes you look thoughtful. The truth is, the tankard had a distinct aroma of stale courage and time. You follow a trail of breadcrumbs, not metaphorical ones. Actual crumbs, from the shelf to the kitchen, through the pantry, and straight to the back door, which creaks open suspiciously, with a sigh that sounds like I warned you about that bard. Ah, the bard. Of course. There's always a bard. He showed up 3 nights ago, wearing a feathered cap, too tall for his height, and a smile too wide for his teeth. Sang songs of heroes no one had heard of, and insisted on rhyming tragedy with cabbage tea. You recall, he admired the tankard, said it had the aura of a drinking vessel that had seen things. You didn't take him seriously, because people say things, but walls mean things. And the walls have been groaning ever since. You sneak out back past the compost pile and the suspiciously moody turnip patch and find footprints in the mud. Small, theatrical, as if someone tried to tiptoe and pirouette at the same time. You follow them, over the hill, past the sheep who don't care, to the edge of the forest, where a makeshift camp has been set up with the flair of someone who read about camping in a poem, but never actually tried it. There by the sputtering fire sits the bard, and next to him the tankard, being used as a toothbrush cup. You almost faint. You approach, slowly, dramatically. "Excuse me," you say, voice trembling with sacred fury. "That's not a container for bristles. That's a vessel of memory." The bard jumps, knocks over his lute, steps on his own poem, blinks at you. "Oh," he says, "you mean the mug? I thought it was decorative." Decorative. You inhale through your teeth. The inn misses it. The inn, the walls, the beams, the collective soul of the place. That tankard matters. He tilts his head. "Are you, okay?" You nod, because you are. More okay than him, frankly. You snatch the tankard, brush off the toothpaste froth, whisper an apology to its handle. The bard stares speechless. You consider a parting insult, but decide the tankard deserves better. So you leave in silence the way legends do. Back at the inn, you place the tankard back on its shelf, slightly off kilter as before. The room exhales. A chair scoots into place. The fireplace pops gently, like a grateful burp. The cat meows, once then saunters away, as if to say, "Good. You've earned your existence." You sit nearby watching, and that's when you hear it. The tankard humming, not loud, just a soft vibration in the wood. It's remembering, telling the story of its great escape, the indignity of toothpaste, the pride of return. You smile, because you know someone will ask about it. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next year. They'll point and say, "What's the story with that one?" And the tankard will be ready. Because tankards don't just hold ale, they hold everything. You can feel it before you see it. A shift in the grain of the wood, a rustling sigh in the beams, the quiet tension of a building trying very hard not to roll its metaphorical eyes. Someone has written another complaint scroll. Of course they have. It's always the ones who arrive with 3 capes demand extra hay for their emotional support goose and ask if the barley stew is gluten aware. You don't even flinch anymore. You hear the scraping of quill on parchment long before the ink dries, a muttered disgrace, a huff of wounded dignity, and the aggressive tearing of paper as if the air itself should be ashamed. The scroll is nailed to the complaints wall, which is really just the back of the privy door, but tradition gives it weight. And like every scroll before it, this one begins with the ceremonial greeting. To whom it may concern, probably someone incompetent. Ah, a classic. You settle in, pressing your ear to the wood. You know the inn itself is listening, each plank and nail absorbing the petty fury, like a sponge soaking up spilled entitlement. The walls have heard worse. But this scroll has ambition. It's 15 feet long, written in looping, furious calligraphy with suspiciously lavender ink. There are flourishes, bullet points shaped like tiny skulls, a wax seal featuring a goat in a powdered wig. You begin reading. The straw in room 2 was not fluffed to symmetrical perfection, resulting in severe lumbar ennui. Fair, but also nonsense. You move on. The rooster crowed at 4:12 a.m. instead of 4:00 a.m., precisely, thus sabotaging my spiritual sunrise alignment. The rooster is named Jeff. He does what he wants. The soup was too soupy. This one hurts a little, but the best part comes near the end. The walls stared at me, judged me, whispered things, possibly Latin. You smile, because that one's true. You know exactly who wrote it. Lady Ermintrude of House Passive Aggression. She arrived with 4 trunks, a silver chamber pot, and an entourage of 5, none of whom seemed to like her. She criticized the stairs, too stair-like, the firewood smelled of trees, and the cat exuded judgment. She also tragically sat directly beneath the small rafter knot that does occasionally mutter in Latin when damp. That's on the rafter, not your fault. Still, the scroll is a masterpiece. So much energy, so much indignation. It begins to unravel physically across the taproom floor, and the cat chases it like a ribbon of contempt. You wonder briefly if it should be preserved in a museum of noble suffering. But then you remember where you live, and that there is no museum, just the privy wall and the slightly damp bin labeled grievances and other fantasies. You sigh. Then you make tea. Later, the inn holds a reading. Not official. Nothing is ever official here. But word gets around. By evening, the room is full. A baker from next door brings muffins. A goat wanders, incensing drama. Even the fireplace perks up, crackling with anticipation. You stand in front of the scroll like a town crier who moonlights as a comedian. The performance begins. I ordered a boiled egg and received one that was clearly too optimistic. Snorts. The soap looked at me funny. Cackles. The walls whisper when I chew. A cheer from the bar. You pause. Then, with theatrical flair, you unfurl the final section. And finally, I shall never return to this wretched excuse for an establishment except to check if anyone has improved. A long silence, followed by a single resounding clap from the goat. It feels right. You post the scroll proudly on the complaints wall. It joins centuries of inked outrage. Some written on parchment, others scratched into bark. One notoriously furious note carved onto a carrot, the carrot did not survive. Each complaint tells a story of expectations unmet, of stews misunderstood, of the eternal war between comfort and reality. But more than that, they are confessions. Raw, messy proof that someone stayed here long enough to care, even if what they cared about was the angle of sunlight on their goblet. And the inn remembers them all, in creaks, in cracks, in the way the floorboard near table 4 always sighs when someone demands room temperature mead. Later that night, you hear scratching again. Someone is writing another scroll. You don't need to look. You already know, because the walls are vibrating in that special way they do when someone spells outrageous with 3 extra vowels. You press your ear close. The voice mutters. Also, the goat winked at me, and I didn't appreciate the tone. You smile, because tomorrow there will be muffins again, and laughter, and someone will ask to read the great scroll of soup too soupy one more time, and the walls will whisper again, probably in Latin. It starts with a candle. They always say ghosts chill the room, but no one warns you about the poetry. One verse too many, and poof, every candle in the room gasps out like it just heard a clumsy metaphor about longing. You learn quickly. It's not the creaking floorboards, the rattling chains, or the mirror fogging from within. No. Here the real danger is a couplet, specifically anything that rhymes heart with apart. You first noticed it on a Tuesday. A traveling minstrel was reciting something about moonlight destiny and the tragic loneliness of a horse that no one understood. He got 3 stanzas in before the temperature dropped like a stone in a cold stew. Then darkness, a howling wind, and the distinct sound of someone groaning from the walls, not unlike a medieval sigh of unbearable second-hand embarrassment. You thought it was the wind, until it started correcting grammar. The inn has been many things: a tavern, a rest stop, a temporary barn during the chicken coup of '83. But it has always had standards, even among spirits, especially among spirits. The ghost in question doesn't rattle chains or float through walls. That would be too undignified. Instead, it waits, in the rafters, in the ink of unedited sonnets, in the faint scent of lavender and critique. You don't know its name. No one does. But it hates poetry, and it's very good at showing it. Every so often, someone stumbles in with a lute and feelings. They mean well. They really do. They just want to sing about the girl in the tower, the boy with the cursed knee, or how the stars remind them of unresolved daddy issues. But as soon as they utter, "O night, thy silence is my pain's refrain," the ghost strikes, lights out, windows shutter, and occasionally a sudden nosebleed. Even the furniture groans in protest. One stool in the corner has developed a permanent limp from enduring an especially melodramatic haiku. You've tried to warn people. There's even a sign on the wall: absolutely no poetry after sunset. Exceptions: limericks, roast rhymes, and the occasional dirty ballad. Still, they persist, because some travelers believe they are chosen, that their pain is art, that their ex deserves to be immortalized in a 42-verse saga titled Betrayal by Moonlight and Mead. It never ends well. One bard left with singed eyebrows. Another was haunted by the sound of their own voice, reciting bad verse backwards for 7 nights straight. They call that the ballad loop curse. But you've made peace with it. You've even come to admire the ghost. There's something oddly comforting about a spirit who refuses to tolerate mediocrity. It's like living with a cranky old editor. You start to hear it breathe when someone rhymes love with dove. You swear you saw a shadow throw shade when a traveler used the word melancholify. No one deserves to survive the phrase, my soul is a wounded phoenix. No one. And yet, one night something changes. A girl walks in, young, quiet, lopsided hat. She orders soup and sits by the hearth, alone. You don't notice at first. She seems normal. No loot, no dramatic cape, no smell of tragically repressed emotion. But then she pulls out a journal and begins to whisper. You brace yourself. Sure enough, the candles flicker. The wind picks up. Even the goat in the stable looks uneasy. But the girl keeps writing, muttering under her breath. You catch a few lines. Soft, sharp, something about calluses and harvest moons, about her mother's hands, about dirt under fingernails, and laughter that tastes like ash. And the candles stay lit. The inn holds its breath. So do you. The ghost says nothing. No groan. No gust. Just a stillness you haven't felt in years. She finishes, closes her book, and stares into the fire like she didn't just tame the inn's oldest critic. You walk over, casually, ask if she wants more soup. She says yes, and nothing else. But as you turn to ladle another bowl, you hear it. A whisper from the beams, a sigh, content, maybe even impressed. You post a new sign the next day. Poetry permitted on Tuesdays, if it's good. And the inn doesn't object. In fact, it seems lighter somehow. The beams creak with less judgment. The fireplace crackles in something like approval. Even the cat, who once hissed at anyone carrying parchment, now curls up near the girl's boots. She comes every week now, never reads aloud, just writes, and leaves one line behind each time, scratched lightly into the wood beneath her table. You read them after she's gone. You don't share them. But the ghost always listens, and the candles always stay lit. It's morning. At least that's what the sun claims as it slithers through the shutters like a golden rat looking for leftover cheese. You groan. Not because you're hungover, although you are, but because mornings in a medieval inn are liars. Everything pretends. The light pretends to be warm. The bread pretends to be fresh. And everyone pretends that nothing happened the night before. The walls remember. They always do. You sit up on a straw mattress that's somehow both damp and itchy. Your mouth tastes like betrayal and pickled onions. Your boots are on the wrong feet. Your dignity is nowhere to be found. Though rumor has it, it was last seen dancing with a broom around midnight. The inn creaks softly like it too is recovering. Downstairs, someone is whistling. It's too cheerful. Too early. It must be Alain, the man who claims he never gets hangovers and only drinks to enhance spiritual clarity. You hate him a little, but only until he trips on the last step and swears loud enough to rattle a tankard. Balance restored. You drag yourself to the common room. It smells like spilled ale, old wood, and shame. The fire is half dead. The embers grumbling like disgruntled grandparents who disapprove of last night's choices. You find your chair, the one that doesn't squeak unless someone lies while sitting in it. You sit. It screams. Well, no point denying it. You may have promised eternal love to a barmaid named Tilda, who turned out to be married, to the innkeeper, who is currently scrubbing blood off a spoon. Breakfast arrives. Oatmeal, if you can call it that. It jiggles with the kind of confidence only food that should not jiggle can possess. You poke it. It stares back. You eat it anyway. Because this is the price you pay for laughter and lager, and the illusion that singing off-key until dawn was a form of art. A man enters. He's wrapped in a bedsheet like it's a royal cloak. You recognize him. He arrived last night, claiming to be a noble, ordered 3 rounds for his people, and fell asleep in the fireplace. He nods solemnly and says, "A fine evening of diplomacy." No one corrects him. It's the unspoken rule of the morning we do not acknowledge what we remember. A woman clutches her head and whispers, "I think I joined a cult." Someone else mutters, "I think I started one." They lock eyes, shrug, sip tea. Outside, the sun is shining in that aggressive way that makes everything feel suspicious. Your liver files a complaint. Your stomach negotiates for peace. Your memory refuses to cooperate. The walls, of course, know everything. They whisper things as you walk by. Little things. Bits of last night's nonsense preserved in timber and dust. You told the table you invented spoons. You challenged a pigeon to a duel. You tried to seduce the broom. Again, the walls don't judge. They just record, like drunk archivists, with better handwriting. You find your coin purse. It is heavier than you expected, which means someone else paid, or you robbed yourself from a parallel timeline. Either way, you tip the innkeeper generously. He nods, still scrubbing the spoon. His eyes say, "We both know what you did." His mouth says, "Come back soon." This is love in the language of hangovers. You overhear someone whispering to the wall. They say, "Did I really kiss the donkey?" The wall creaks back. It could mean yes. It could mean again. Some things are best left ambiguous. You step outside. The air is cold. The kind of cold that grabs your ears and slaps you across the moral compass. You smell wood smoke, manure, and regret. You love this place. You hate this place. You'll be back next week. There's a girl sketching something in the dirt with a stick. She looks up and says, "You were funny last night." You nod like you remember. She giggles, then says, "You cried into your shoes." Ah, yes. You vaguely recall salty ankles. You nod again with gravitas. The baker walks by holding 3 loaves and an unspoken grudge. He mutters something about drunken song fights and why the oven door smells like goat. You wave. He does not wave back. Your social debts exceed your financial ones. This is the natural order of things. You hear someone practicing excuses. "I must have been enchanted. It was the mead, not me." The moon has power over poets. All true, all false, all necessary. Because the morning after is not for truth. It is for narrative control, and maybe extra bacon. Back inside the fire is roaring again. Someone started a story about a ghost who only speaks in rhyming couplets. Someone else adds that it only appears when the stew is overcooked. Everyone nods. It feels real. It probably isn't. But here stories stick to the beams like old soup. And if you tell a lie well enough, the walls might just protect you from the truth. You glance at the chair. It squeaks once, mockingly. You deserve it. You'll do it again. Of course you will. Because what is life without a place to forget yourself? And what is an inn, if not a confessional that serves ale? As you pack up to leave, the floor groans a little under your boots. You hear a murmur from the walls. Not quite words, but not silence either. A sort of fondness, the way a place says, "You're awful, but you're mine." You smile, step into the sunlight, and pretend you're better now. The truth, you'll be back. Same boots, new mistakes, and a chair that knows everything.